It's election night 2022 and will be live as voters head to the polls across the country. The issues driving this election cycle: abortion rights, the state of the economy, immigration, and more.
Right here in Evanston, see how national issues are playing out locally.
Turnout in this election already breaking records, with some too young to vote making their voices heard.
I want to do something that's can make change.
And throughout the night, we'll check in with NNN's Max Rothfeder at the big board for a breakdown of key races that will decide the fate of the House and Senate.
All that is coming your way on the Northwestern News Report's Election Night Special.
It's your election news, results, and analysis right now.
Hello and welcome to NNN's Election Night Special. I'm Ela Jalcao.
And I'm Diego Ramos Bachara. Tonight, it's all about that building and who will control its chambers. The stakes could not be higher. Democrats clinging to a Senate majority thanks only to Vice President Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote. In the House, Republicans need to flip just 5 seats to win back the chamber.
There are plenty of numbers that are alarming to both political parties. Now, frightening for Democrats, the president's popularity remains low, and a new Gallup poll underscores that the economy and inflation are driving issues in this election. And on those two issues, voters say they think Republicans can do a much better job handling them. But for Democrats, on the other hand, recent polls show Democrats hanging on to close Senate races.
Now, according to an NBC News result, as of earlier today, over 45 million Americans have cast their ballots during early or mail-in voting in an election that could shatter turnout records. Within each party, the stakes are absolutely high. An NBC News poll finds that 80% of Democrats and Republicans believe their political opposition poses a threat that will destroy America as we know it.
Polls are already closed in Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky, Vermont, Indiana, and Virginia. Now in Georgia, we're watching two very important races. In Indiana, we're counting as we speak. Let's take a look at the results so far. Now the Senate race between Herschel Walker and incumbent Raphael Warnock, that race is way too early to call as of right now.
And we're also watching the governor's race between incumbent Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams. That race is also too early to call.
Moving on to Indiana's race for Senate, Indiana has 4% with Republican Todd Young, leading the way with 55% of the vote to 42% for Democratic Thomas McDermott.
Meanwhile, here in Illinois, polls are still open and voters are continuing to cast their ballots. We're going to go live to Logan Scajano at a polling place in Evanston. Now, Logan, how has the turnout been so far?
Hey Diego, hey Melina. You know, this looks like a library behind me, which it is, but it's also been a polling place here on Election Day in Evanston. And we were here early on around lunchtime, and it was a steady flow of traffic coming in and out, people casting their ballots. And from what we heard, it just was about a very quick process, 2 or 3 minutes or so. And lately, with just under an hour left until polls close, things have been dwindling down a little bit. Traffic has been decreasing, but that doesn't detract from just how important this election is. And even here in Evanston, where there's a strong Democratic majority, there are plenty of other things on the ballot, and we'll get to those throughout the night. Obviously, there's an important referendum here in the city where ranked choice voting could be implemented in 2025. Also, in the state as a whole, the Workers' Right Amendment, Amendment 1, could allow workers the right to officially unionize. That could go in the Constitution if enough people support it. But let's talk a little bit more about voter turnout in general here in Evanston. Overall, throughout the years, it's been very good. In 2016 and 2018, Evanston actually led Cook County in voter turnout with just over 80%. things weren't as good in the primaries earlier this year, with actually an abysmal 25% of the eligible voters showing out to vote. But here in early voting, about 10,000 people, just under that, showed up to the Civic Center just down the way on Ridge Avenue to vote early. And presumably, obviously, that number has increased here today. And they're voting because there's a lot of important issues on the ballot here in Evanston, as I talked about, and nationally as well. The economy, obviously, is a big issue for voters. Abortion, reproductive rights, guns, and also the threat to American democracy. We talked to one voter earlier today who says he's casting his ballot to save democracy in America. Take a listen.
Our entire republic is under threat right now because, some candidates are saying they will disregard the outcome of the election if it does not favor them. And that is just profoundly anti-democratic.
So like we said, guys, just under an hour until polls close here in Evanston. We'll be keeping an eye on the voter turnout, and we'll get back to you guys later on.
Logan, as always, thanks so much for your fantastic reporting. And yes, we will continue to check in with you throughout the night. Now, community members from all over Evanston are helping out at the polls tonight, including students at Evanston Township High School. The Voting Access Committee there helps students of any age get involved at the polls. NNN's Ellie Skelly joins us here in the studio to talk a little bit more about how students are pitching in. Ellie?
Hi, Diego. Yeah, so I spoke with students and faculty at ETHS, and they really said that they were motivated around, certain key topics and issues like abortion or climate change, which were concerning for them, but also they seemed really excited to be civically engaged, whether that be through voting for the first time or finding alternative methods to get involved at the polls. So here's what they had to say when I spoke to them.
Talia Berger-White is a senior at Evanston Township High School. She co-chairs the Voting Access Committee, a student-led organization that bolsters ETHS students' engagement in elections. But she's not old enough to actually cast a ballot.
I missed the voting deadline by 3 weeks, so I was like, I want to do something that's can make change.
For Berger-White, the overturning of Roe v. Wade was a tipping point in realizing how much was at stake at the polls.
In Illinois, my right to an abortion is protected right now, but who knows what'll happen in 2 weeks.
She still wanted to make an impact. So she wrote postcards to eligible Cook County residents, encouraging them to get out and vote.
I was like, okay, maybe I can start writing postcards, and I did 300 of those over the summer, and then I was like, okay, but why don't we do this at school?
The Voting Access Committee has led students to write more than 500 postcards during lunch periods. And on election day, they've arranged for buses to pick voting eligible students up here and bringing them to polling centers, like here at Alice Miller Chapel.
It's still a question of okay, I have the right to vote, but what does that mean?
Diana Balitan is one of the faculty sponsors of the committee.
A learning process in terms of how to motivate students around different issues.
Balitan works with the committee to inspire students to action.
But they have so much power to say something and push for issues.
A possibility for students all across the country.
All high schools have someone who you can go to and say, hey, I have an idea, let's get this started.
ETHS students showing you can stay civically engaged even when you can't cast a ballot.
Thanks, Ellie. And as that clearly shows, there's clearly a lot to watch out for tonight in these midterm elections between all the different races and all the different results that they slowly come in. And sort of to help break it all down, we're going to go over to Max Rothfeder over at the big board to sort of break down a little bit more and talk a little bit more to us about what are the key races to watch out for tonight. Max?
Yeah, thanks, Diego. So one of the big numbers we're watching tonight is this big number 1. That's just one seat in the Senate that Republicans need to net gain in order to flip the Senate. So let's take a look at what that could mean. There's 4 races we're really watching, but what I want to talk about first is the 35 seats that are up for election. 14 of those belong to Democrats, 21 belong to Republicans. But here's the big key. There's only 1 Republican seat that realistically is a toss-up to go blue. There's 3 Democrat seats that could realistically go red. Those are Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada right there. So let's take a look a little bit closer at those races. In Nevada, we've got Senator Catherine Cortez Masto going up against Adam Laxalt right there. That race is incredibly close. The Republican is a little bit ahead in the polls. Now in Georgia, we've got Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker. Again, has been neck and neck, could go either way. Republicans need it if they want to take control. In Arizona, we've got Mark Kelly against Blake Masters, the senator from the current Senator Mark Kelly is looking okay right now, but again, that one is really close. And then Pennsylvania, retiring Senator to me right there is now between John Fetterman and Dr. Mehmet Oz, and whoever's able to win that, the Republicans really need to get that one going as well. If they can flip any of those, they're going to do really well. We're also watching New Hampshire, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Those races aren't quite as close, but again, they're going to be really important if Democrats want to somehow keep their majority in the Senate. So let's take a look at the polls real quick. I have two that I pulled, 538 and the Marist poll here, and you can see just how close it is. They've both got Georgia in a deadlock. Now, one thing about Georgia, we'll talk about it later, is if neither candidate gets 50%, we're going to see a runoff. That won't be decided for almost a month. In the rest of the races, we've got Pennsylvania. 538 has it tied. Marist has the Democrat up, but again, it's been really close in the polls. Nevada, we got the Republican up a little, and then Arizona, it's neck and neck there. So again, these four races, that's what we're going to be watching in the Senate. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the top issues. Diego mentioned them, and Melina mentioned them a little earlier in the night. The economy, 49%. That's always a big one going into the midterm elections. Coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's going to be important. Abortion has been talked about a lot in the past year with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That's a big issue on voters' minds. Of course, crime, gun policy, and immigration. We're going to see really how those issues play out amongst voters in the swing states that we will talk about throughout the night. Now, in terms of poll closings, Georgia has closed for both the governor and Senate race. We'll see those results coming in the next few hours. We, of course, have Illinois, which is going to close around the 7 p.m. hour Central Time, then Pennsylvania, Arizona, Texas around 8, and then Nevada around 9. But we're going to see the results probably a couple hours, if not a few days after that. Now to the House, just 5 seats. That's one of the smallest margins in history that Republicans have to net gain if they want to flip the House. So let's take a look at what it looks like right now. 212 Republican seats, 220 Democrat seats, and 538, it doesn't look good for the Democrats. 84% chance they say Republicans will be able to take control of the House. And this is why. There are 35 seats currently being labeled toss-ups by the Cook Political Report. Of those, 25 are Democrats, only 10 are Republicans. And remember, Republicans only have to net 5 seats. Now, it's always been the case that the House in the midterm elections has been a big problem for the sitting president's party. Let's take a look at the history. 2010, we have President Obama. The Democrats held the Senate, but Republicans got 63 seats in the House. You can see it right there. 2014 midterms, Obama's president. Again, Republicans do really well. Democrat president, Republicans do well. 2018 midterms, we had Trump as the president, of course, and then Democrats were actually able to do really well in the midterms, gained 41 seats. Biden is the current president, a Democrat, so if the pattern holds, Republicans are going to have a really good night. We'll see what happens. That's what I'm watching. We'll be back with more throughout the hour, and we're about to take a quick break.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie. How sketch is ready? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes. Look at that. You didn't even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, backpack kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Worried about your friend, but don't know how to reach out?
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR, it's all good. If you think you should check in, yeah, you should. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
You guys ready? Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving.
I definitely can't drive.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
Welcome back. Polls are closed in Georgia, where abortion is proving to be a key issue for both gubernatorial and Senate candidates. Coming into the election, the state's Republican Governor Brian Kemp signed a law restricting abortions after about 6 weeks. Now, abortion took center stage at Georgia's last gubernatorial debate, where Democratic challenger Stacey Abrams pressed Kemp on his abortion record, attacking him for not commenting on the allegations against Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker of the Republican Party. Controversy following the self-proclaimed anti-abortion candidate throughout the campaign after an ex-girlfriend claimed he paid for her to have an abortion. This didn't seem to hurt Walker, however, within the Republican Party, with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell continuing to speak in support of Walker. It's a race the Republicans don't want to give up on, certainly. Georgia is one of many close races the GOP is focusing on, with hopes to gain control of the Senate. Now, Georgia was also one of the first states to restrict access to abortion following the Supreme Court's overturning of the Roe v. Wade decision in June.
Now, by the time Roe was overturned, incoming college students across the country were preparing to move, with some worrying about the uncertainty of abortion access in their new homes. NNN's Simone Garber spoke to students here at Northwestern on their reaction to the landmark decision.
Northwestern University first years are starting their 4 years of college in a state where they know their abortion rights are protected.
Reproductive access is still relatively secure here comparatively to the rest of the country.
Roe v. Wade was overturned on June 24th, just over a month after high school seniors had committed to colleges.
I was walking into the the stadium we were graduating at with my friends, and I got the news alert that it had been overturned.
In Illinois, elective abortions are legal up to around 26 weeks of pregnancy. And students like DeFilippis considered this when applying to colleges.
I took into consideration the states that I was applying in. I didn't apply anywhere that had those trigger bans.
A New York native, DeFilippis' home state also protects reproductive health care.
People come to New York to get reproductive health care.
But for others,
I'm living in a state where I don't totally know politically what's going on. Roe v. Wade, I'm just kind of I'm just visiting almost. It feels weird, but this is going to be my home for the next 4 years.
And for the years Northwestern is home, resources like the Center for Awareness, Response, and Education, also known as CARE, help the university make sure students have access to all forms of sexual health care.
We support all people's autonomy to have wellness and safety.
CARE, continuing to provide essential healthcare services to the Northwestern student body.
We will always take care of people. We will always find creative ways to show up for community and support people on their journeys.
Simone Garber, Northwestern News Network.
And Simone joins us now, along with NNN's Emma Sullivan, for more on how abortion is playing out in this election. So as you mentioned, Simone, in your story, this issue has been on voters' minds since the landmark Supreme Court decision Roe v. Wade was overturned in June. According to a Pew Research study, over half of registered voters say abortion will be an important consideration when casting their midterm vote. Incumbent Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has made his passionate pro-choice stance clear to voters, and that comes in stark contrast to his Republican opponent, Darren Bailey. While recent polling projects a landslide win for Pritzker, Bailey has been able to energize support from his far-right voters, most of whom are concentrated in the southern regions of Illinois. Simone and Emma have been following this issue closely in the past few weeks. Thank you both for being here. So, Simone, we're going to start with you. in the months since Roe v. Wade was overturned, how have laws regarding abortion access been enacted in return to the Roe v. Wade overturn varied by state?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Melina. So in some Midwest states, like for example, South Dakota, Missouri, and Wisconsin, abortions are completely banned. Now, in others like Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Iowa, and North Dakota, the bans are being blocked by the courts due to legal challenges. So in Ohio, for instance, it's somewhat of an anomaly, as there's currently a lawsuit challenging the state's heartbeat ban, which bars abortions at around 6 weeks of pregnancy. Now, in September, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer took to the Senate floor to respond to Senator Lindsey Graham's proposal of a near total abortion ban in South Carolina. Let's take a listen.
President, proposals like the one today send a clear message from MAGA Republicans to women across the country. Your body, our choice.
So in the states where these proposed bans have been rejected, residents still have access to abortion care until the court is able to come to a decision stating otherwise. In many of these states, the election is still somewhat of a toss-up due to a slim voter margin between competing candidates. So that's something to follow for tonight.
Thank you, Simone. And Emma, moving to you, how important is abortion to voters?
Thanks, Melina. It's really hard to say right now. What we are noticing is that the issue of abortion has motivated many voters, particularly Democrats, to turn out to vote in the election. Following the Dobbs versus Jackson ruling, in many states, including battleground states, we've seen that there has been a surge in voter registration, particularly among women, which makes sense. In the weeks following the Dobbs versus Jackson ruling, 83% of Democrats said that they are more likely to vote because of what happened in the ruling. And 53% of independents, said the same thing. A Pew Research poll, Central poll from this August found that 56% of voters said that the issue of abortion would be very important in determining their midterm vote. However, we are seeing that inflation and the economy do continue to be the top issues of concern on voters' minds, and these voters do tend to vote Republican. And we've recently seen a shift in suburban women who are voting more for prioritizing the economy over abortion in their voting concerns. So we'll have to wait to see how that plays out.
And Simone, we're going to take it back to you for Illinois specifically. So in light of the upset in 2016, how are voters likely to turn out for the Illinois gubernatorial election?
Yeah, so as we learned from 2016, virtually anything can happen, which is why it's so important to get out there and vote. But polling does show a strong likelihood, however, that incumbent J.B. Pritzker will be reelected for a second term. His Republican opponent, Darren Bailey, was endorsed by former President Donald Trump and has proved to be popular among far-right voters, most of whom are concentrated, like you said, in the southern portions of the state. Now, Pritzker worked tirelessly during his campaign to deter more moderate Republican candidates like Richard Irwin, as Irwin's cross-party appeal might have incentivized some ambivalent voters to vote red. So Pritzker fully endorses accessible reproductive health care, with Bailey taking the opposite, extremely restrictive approach. And since the majority of Illinois residents do support the current progressive status quo on abortion access, Pritzker's pro-choice status will only improve his likelihood of re-election, we anticipate.
And Emma, now Bailey definitely opposes Pritzker's platform on many issues, including abortion. How would his potential election tonight change the fate of reproductive access in Illinois?
Yeah, so as you said, J.B. Pritzker and State Senator Dan Blake have taken starkly different stances on abortion. In 2019, Pritzker did sign the Reproductive Health Act into law, which established a fundamental right to health care, including reproductive health. In the wake of the Dobbs versus Jackson ruling, he called the decision abhorrent, and he vowed that Illinois would remain a safe haven for reproductive justice. And although Bailey did say that he opposes abortion and would like to restrict it with no exceptions for rape or incest, he does recognize that a bill with abortion restrictions is not likely going to make it to the governor's desk, given that the majority of the House and Senate in Illinois are Democrats.
Thank you so much to our panel. We'll continue to see how this issue will play out in Illinois when polls close later tonight. Diego?
Thanks, Melina. And now shifting gears to another equally important topic and with significant implications for youth LGBTQ+ rights. Now, according to the Human Rights Campaign, a record number of more than 300 anti-LGBTQ+ bills were introduced in state legislatures this year, and more than 130 of those targeted transgender people. NNN spoke with Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky on how welcoming Illinois is for the LGBTQ+ community.
If we maintain control of the
Supreme Court of Illinois. I think Illinois absolutely is a haven.
And NNN's Jenny Hudd joins us now in the studio to take a look at this issue specifically in Illinois. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi, Diego. So yeah, in Illinois, there's no ballot initiative, specifically on LGBTQ plus rights, but with that mass introduction of anti-trans legislation nationwide over the past year, as well as the agendas of some Illinois candidates, local LGBTQ plus youth are in fear. Take a listen. This is 13-year-old Rowan Cates. Rowan enjoys getting Starbucks with friends and solving math problems, but the 8th grader says they don't feel safe outside of Evanston.
It makes me so glad that I was born here and I can feel safe.
Coming out around 2 years ago, Rowan changed their name, cut their hair, and identifies as agender.
Coming out definitely made me feel more like myself.
But they've also realized not everywhere is like home. When visiting North Carolina,
I started noticing how many shops didn't have the all are welcome here little sticker on the front, and I started looking for even rainbow stuff, but there wasn't any.
Rowan may be too young to vote, but understands what's at stake.
It hurt to know that people in power weren't always going to be there for my groups and communities.
In Illinois,
there's not a ballot initiative or item that's related to LGBTQ plus rights.
But Yonka says who is on the ballots matters. Some Republican candidates, including Governor hopeful Darren Bailey and Attorney General candidate Tom DeVore, are suggesting they may cut back on issues critical to the LGBTQ plus community.
The idea of someone running for governor with those policies does not surprise or worry me. It's the idea of someone being in power with those policies.
Both Bailey and DeVore advocate for parents' rights, meaning they could help parents opt out of or push against Illinois' K-12 sex education law, in which students learn about consent, sexual orientation, gender identity, and more. Under current state law, parents can opt out of it. But for Noelle Palmer, who began her transition in March 2020,
and the idea of that getting taken away from them is definitely terrifying.
The Human Rights Campaign lists that Illinois has more pro than anti-equality laws. Democratic incumbent Governor J.B. Pritzker has also passed several pro-equality laws.
This is not like a specific, this law makes me feel safe thing, but Illinois is one of the few states that has solid protections in place for LGBTQ and especially transgender people.
But on a national level, the conversations on the LGBTQ plus community are less positive. According to the Washington Post, more anti-transgender legislation has been filed in 2022 than ever in the U.S. From restricting gender-affirming healthcare to banning trans athletes in school sports, many states, including our neighbors Wisconsin and Indiana, have introduced or passed such legal actions.
Every time we put those protections in place in Illinois, we provide inspiration to other states, and we provide an opportunity for young people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, who need a safe haven to go to, that such a place exists.
These concerns translating to the polls for young voters.
This is the thing I need to do, and it's something that feels important, but it doesn't always feel like it's going to have an effect.
As advocates say, having the right elected officials can lead to the right policies.
It's all about turnout. It's the only issue. Who's going to show up to vote? So people who care about this issue better turn out to vote.
Jenny Hudd, Northwestern News Network.
Fantastic reporting as always, Jenny. And we'll be right back with more on voters' top issues and results later on. Don't go away.
At Northwestern, we're wildcats in every way.
Cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for the sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Welcome back to NNN's Election Show Special. As Americans grapple with an increasingly unstable economic backdrop, candidates are campaigning on their solutions to improve everything from inflation to gas prices. In recent polls, voters have ranked the economy to be the #1 issue driving them at the ballot box. Inflation is a particularly important issue for voters as prices continue to rise. Americans may be weighing the current administration's attempts to lower inflation by raising interest rates. Rates are around 3% higher than they were when the Federal Reserve began hiking them back in March. While rates make it more expensive to borrow, consumer spending is not slowing down as much as the Fed had initially hoped. Granted, it takes some time for higher interest rates to impact prices, but with the slower consumer spending and business spending, many worry that we won't see prices come down anytime soon. And with gas prices putting pressure on Americans at the pump, many may be looking to candidates promising to lower prices. One way to lower prices is to release more oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which would bring much needed supply and allow gas companies to lower prices. Now, President Biden did do this back in mid-October, releasing 15 million barrels. Biden also called out gas companies, urging them to lower prices immediately instead of waiting for the delivery of oil. Supply issues stem from both the war in Ukraine as well as the reluctance by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies, the major global oil producers, to increase supply. For more on how the economy is impacting voters in this election, let's go to Melina, who is in the studio with Northwestern professor Martin Eichenbaum. Melina?
Thank you, Diego. Professor Eichenbaum, thank you so much for being here with us. I'd like to start with the current state of the economy. We're obviously at a very fragile state when it comes to inflation. What are some actions that we should expect or we should be seeing from the government and the Federal Reserve?
Well, let me start with the Federal Reserve. Most of the mainstream view now is that the Fed was behind in raising interest rates to slow down the economy to get inflation under control, and they've been playing catch up for about a year. They have consistently raised how high they're going to have to go with interest rates, and they still think they're optimistic if you look at their newest forecast. So I think it's much more likely that interest rates will go above 5. So I think looking forward, most people think there is going to be a mild recession, not a catastrophe, not a financial crisis, but a slowdown because it's absolutely central that we get inflation under control.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, tonight, obviously, the midterm elections are critical in this and how we move forward. And the economy is, of course, on the minds of many voters. Polls are showing that voters are putting maybe more faith on Republicans' hands to handle inflation. In your perspective, how do you think that the elections tonight will affect how the state of the economy will be moving forward?
Great question. In principle, the Fed will do what it's going to do. Right? They're supposed to be independent. They are absolutely committed to raising rates to slow the economy down. And if I had to bet, my bet would be that they would continue to do that. Many things could go wrong, so let's take that as a given. But one real danger is that many Republicans, not all, many Republicans have said that they will be unwilling to increase the debt ceiling, so there's a limit on how high the national debt can be, that Congress has to vote on. The problem is we've already committed how much taxes we're going to take in and how much we're going to spend. So it's a really weird thing. The implications of such a decision will be catastrophic if what that means is for the first time in history, we don't pay off our obligations in Treasury bills.
Yeah, you mentioned how potentially the Republicans are going to address this. What if the Democrats remain in majority?
We would certainly not face a problem of increasing the national debt limit. So I think the Democrats will have to be relatively conservative looking forward because the last thing the economy needs now is a massive influx of spending analogous to what we had in May 2021. So I think there are going to be real constraints on what anybody in power can do now in terms of more spending, and they may have to raise taxes.
Great. And then one last question. I would like to pivot to student loans and how the elections might potentially affect Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. And that this plan was announced in August, and it is aimed to kind of make college more accessible and affordable. There has been obviously opposition by Republicans. How do you think that the results tonight might affect the future of the plan?
Well, there's two things that are going on, right? Right now it's in the courts, and it's sort of stalled. So I hope elections don't affect the judges. So that will be what it's going to be. The student plan is very controversial. It's one of those issues where reasonable people can disagree. So I think there'll be a more serious debate if the Republicans win. The question is, how much should we subsidize or make it easier for students, not all of whom are rich, but many of whom are rich, compared to national medians? So, as they put it, why should we tax, some poor guy working in a factory so that you can get a loan to study econ, which you're going to make a pretty good living anyways? So on net, I think if Republicans win, it will be less likely that we'll see substantial, broad-based student loans relief. But part of that's judicial. I don't think, Biden will be able to veto many things, because whatever happens, I don't think that the Republicans will have a supermajority. And so he can block stuff, but then they can block stuff that he wants to do. So we'll probably just have stasis.
Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Diego, I'll send it back over at the desk to you.
Right, and so as we just heard from Professor Eichenbaum, one particular concern from college students in this time of high inflation may be their student loans. As the Fed raises interest rates, students' loans will also continue to increase. But with applications open for President Biden's debt relief program, where federal loan borrowers may get up to $20,000 in debt forgiven, our Caitlin Bender-Thomas breaks down how students will be impacted. Caitlin?
Yeah, so in light of the current hold on student loan debt relief, I spoke to students about what the relief will mean to them, and here's what they had to say. The Biden administration plans to relieve up to $20,000 in student loan debt for eligible borrowers.
No one's going to say no to that.
Biden says the goal is to give more financial breathing room to people across the country.
If more people are kind of put in that better position, I think it'll pay off in the long run.
Northwestern University second year Katrina Chong says she already has over $1,600 worth of debt.
Helping with the debt, with the student debt, will help people kind of get houses, start developing generational wealth, and helping to move on in their life.
But she's not sure this forgiveness is enough.
I wish would be possible is that the debt repayments would extend towards my entire college funds.
The average annual cost of a private university is almost $40,000 according to U.S. News and World Report. At Northwestern, the cost of attendance surpasses $80,000.
There's only so much that I'm willing to take a loan out for, so I have to weigh my options after it gets, it probably gets past $5,000.
To apply for loans, students fill out the free application for student aid, or FAFSA. Colleges use this to determine financial aid eligibility and expected family contribution, or EFC. But it's not always a perfect system.
I've had a situation before with my FAFSA where my parents' retirement funds were counted as income. And I remember how scary it was to see that my EFC was so high.
While the loan application opened in October, some Republicans are attempting to block the plan, saying it could hurt private lenders.
It doesn't seem like that would benefit anyone to to lower the amount of help that the government gives to students, especially of lower class.
Students hoping to continue their education without worrying about the cost. Caitlin Bender-Thomas, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Caitlin. Back to you, Melina.
Polls are still open in most of the country. We'll be back after a short break with more on the issues shaping Election Night 2022.
Worried about your friend but don't know how to reach out?
You could say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR. It's all good if you think you should check in. Yeah, you should.
Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Yo, camping buddy. Okay, you guys ready?
Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving. I definitely can't drive.
Okay.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
In the past 6 months, some local businesses have been raising money for Ukraine as the war with Russia rages. But support is also something they want to see from the representatives as well. NNN's Divya Gupta joins us now. Divya.
In Evanston, businesses are supporting Ukraine through different fundraising events. Back in March, Found Kitchen and Social House participated in Chicago Chefs for Ukraine, and Peckish Pig Brewery crafted a beer to raise funds for the effort. From meals to drinks, local restaurants and stores have been delivering profits to humanitarian efforts. Evanston restaurant Prairie Moon is one of these businesses supporting Ukraine. They raised money through a soup event.
This was one specific way where I felt that we could use the talents that we possess to raise some money for, for the victims in Ukraine.
And for business owners like Strom, their beliefs impact the way they cast their ballots.
We've always been a big supporter of a little bit more of a liberal democratic platforms.
Prairie Moon sold out of every Ukrainian soup they made, and Strom says Evanston's local restaurants hope to see the same giving attitude from lawmakers. Running for Senate, Tammy Duckworth is among other candidates who have spoken in favor of Biden's humanitarian and military aid plan for Ukraine.
We obviously look to our leaders that are like-minded and that hopefully have the vision that we all share, especially here in Evanston.
So some candidates running in Illinois are showing the support that Strom is looking for, but business owners like him still want to see more from their politicians.
Thanks, Divya.
Shifting gears for a second, the war in Ukraine and Russian relations rank as one of voters' top issues for this election. Let's get over to NNN's Jonas Blum to talk a little bit more about how this impacts U.S. voters.
The U.S.'s position on Ukraine has greatly affected politics over the past 9 months. Let's look back to see how he got here. On February 24th, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a, quote, special operation in western Ukraine. That operation was an invasion. From a numbers perspective, the Russian Federation was set up for success. Russia had nearly 1.5 million active duty soldiers ready. Meanwhile, Ukraine's forces comprised 250,000 active duty soldiers. And in 2014, President Putin's invasion of Crimea took only 37 days. In March, the US and its allies quickly pledged support to Ukraine. Here's President Biden speaking in Warsaw.
And now, in the perennial struggle for democracy and freedom, Ukraine and its people are on the front lines.
Congress then swiftly passed H.R. 7691, pledging $40 billion for Ukrainian military aid. And the American public supports this. 74% of Americans believe the U.S. should provide monetary support for Ukraine based on a Pew Research poll. And flash forward to June, war is still raging, but with the overturning of Roe v. Wade dominating headlines, Americans shift their focus away from Eastern Europe. Concern for Ukraine among Americans drops 10 points, according to a Pew Research survey. This trend continues into the fall with another drop. Now the majority of Americans are only somewhat or not at all concerned about the war. And with that, Republican strategy also changes. Instead of bipartisan support for Ukraine, Republican leadership takes an isolationist position. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy saying there would be no, quote, blank check for Ukraine if Republicans took control of Congress. Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responding in Croatia.
Someone made a statement of we're not giving a blank check to Ukraine. We've never given a blank check to Ukraine. The Ukrainians have dealt with any assistance we have given them, and I'm sure you have given them, with great integrity, with great compliance, with great accountability.
And that brings us to tonight, with partisan division on the U.S.'s place in the war. We'll see how these strategies play out with voters as the polls close. Back to you at the desk.
Terrific reporting, Jonas. Thanks so much.
It's now almost 7 p.m. and polls in Illinois will be closing soon. So let's check back with Logan Scrigiano, who is outside a local polling place, the Evanston Public Library. So Logan, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Melina, like you said, things are winding down. People are starting to clear out, and we actually just talked to one of the election judges who gave us a pretty in-depth explanation about kind of what happens once the polls do close down. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show, and for now, just a few more minutes, like you said, for people to cast their ballots. Very important races in this election. Obviously, the governor's race, the one that really has the chance to go either way, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Back to you guys.
Logan, thanks so much as always. Now don't go away. Polls are closing soon in battleground states like Pennsylvania and Florida, as well as here in Illinois. We'll be right back after a short break.
Ready, set, go!
My narrative, since I've been locked up and kind of made my transition, has been like redemption, accountability.
When I come into the classroom environment, every individual that sits amongst me takes education seriously.
cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, spread for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
Welcome back to NNN's election night coverage. Now to the topic of climate change. From wildfires on the west coast to Hurricane Ian on the east, many voters feel the direct impact of recent environmental crises. Climate change is a dividing issue among political parties. While 79% of Democrats say it is at least very important, only 27% of Republicans share that same view. Let's send it over to Diego and our panel for more on how the climate is impacting this election. Diego.
Thanks so much, Melina. And joining us now are NNN's Lance Willem and Caitlin Bender-Thomas. Thanks to both of you for being here. And I want to dive right in. Turning to you, Lance. So in August, as we know, President Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which included historic funding for climate-related initiatives, putting the U.S. back on track to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half by the year 2030 and then become net zero by 2050. Now, could the midterms impact that piece of legislation at all?
Right, so like you said, the Inflation Reduction Act is arguably one of the most influential pieces of climate-related legislation ever passed in the U.S. And part of that is that $370 billion put towards climate-related initiatives. People who are concerned about the state of the climate right now can rest assured that the main structure of the Inflation Reduction Act is very likely to stay intact. And that is because Republicans are not likely at all to take a supermajority in both the Senate and the House. That would be the only case where they could actually do any significant damage to the Inflation Reduction Act, because they'd be able to override any presidential veto from President Biden.
And so, Caitlin, what are some of the most important climate change races on a state level?
So yeah, in North Carolina, the U.S. Senate race between Democrat Sherry Beasley and Republican Ted Budd is one of the most contentious races in the nation right now. With Republicans expected to make gains in the House, Democrats can view this race as pivotal for, retaining control of at least one chamber in Congress. So some important factors that could play a role in this election are, Budd was endorsed by former President Trump, which could help his campaign. But Beasley, she would be the first African American to be elected for this role, and that could energize black voters to get to the polls. But Beasley has definitely made it clear that climate change would be a priority, and it's very important for the economy and the health of residents. Wisconsin is another one with Democratic incumbent Tony Evers and Republican Tim Michels. That is also among one of the closest governor races. Evers has said that combating climate change is a key priority, while Michels, he is doubting the human impact on climate change and has no clear plan on how to combat it. So it's definitely, the outcome of these elections will definitely impact how these states address climate change and also who is affected by them.
For sure, and I want to stay on you for a second. So who are we actually seeing go out to the polls on this issue, and why?
Yeah, for sure. So roughly 79% of Democrats say climate change is at least very important, compared with 46% of independents and 27% of Republicans. Also, 69% of Black Americans and 58% of Hispanic Americans said it's important, compared with just 46% of white Americans. Research has shown that communities of color are disproportionately affected and exposed to environmental hazards such as dirty water and tainted water and dirty air. And a lot of this points back to the issue of redlining, even though it was outlined over a century ago. So redlining really left a fingerprint that continues to linger in the air, and it continues to impact people who live in those same neighborhoods today. So that could definitely explain why more marginalized groups view this issue as more important and maybe going to the polls on it.
Right. And so, Lance, I want to close off this panel with you. So how exactly, because I think the question that we all really want to know is, how exactly will these midterms have any major impacts at all on how effective the U.S. will be at combating climate change in the future?
Right, so like I said, the GOP is unlikely to take a supermajority in both houses of Congress. However, any increased control in the Senate and the House does mean increased control of congressional committees, which means increased oversight over spending towards climate-related initiatives. So that's something to look for, as well as significant state legislature races. For instance, North Carolina, they're just 5 seats away, the Republicans are, from having a supermajority, which would be veto-proof, which is significant in rolling back some climate initiatives in that state.
Lance Willem and Caitlin Bender-Thomas, thank you both so much for being here tonight. Melina, back to you.
Thanks, Diego. As more votes are counted in states across the country, there's a lot more we're watching, especially in those tight races when it comes to Arizona and Pennsylvania. So let's get over to Max Rothfeder at the big board for a check on these important races. Max?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Melina, and I'm going to have this graphic up all night, the 4 key races we're watching. So let's take a look at Arizona and Pennsylvania. So I want to start here with Pennsylvania. In 2022, we've got John Fetterman versus Dr. Oz, but I want to look back at some previous races. Here in 2018, you can see here that Bob Casey, the Democrat, won. And look, he did really well in Erie County, Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh, and then in Philadelphia County, but also in the surrounding counties. Now, if we change into 2016, we can look at the race that Pat Toomey won, the Republican. You can see the difference here. Erie County went red, and the surrounding counties around the Philadelphia area went red. And just to drive this point home, I have the 2 maps side by side here, and you can see the big key, right? Not just in the middle of the state, not just in Erie, but really what I'm watching tonight are these surrounding counties in the Philadelphia area. That's Lancaster, that's Berks, that's Chester. Those are going to be really important going into this election. Now, the other thing we want to watch is Arizona. That's Mark Kelly versus Blake Masters here in the 2022 Senate. But if we go back to 2020 when we had Kelly against McSally, Kelly, of course, won. He's the current senator. And you can see that he won Maricopa County. That's home to Phoenix. There's about 3.5, give or take, million votes in this election. Maricopa County accounts for almost 2 million of those. It's key. So if we take a look here, back in 2016 when John McCain won, he won Maricopa County. He won Phoenix. When the Republican wins, they win Maricopa County. When the Democrat wins, they win Maricopa County. That's the county we got to watch tonight to see who's going to win. Back to y'all at the desk.
Thanks, Max. We'll have more on those races and more as NNN's Election Night coverage continues.
Don't go away. We'll be right back.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
The 2022 midterm elections may just be the most consequential in years, defying political history and resetting modern political norms.
At stake, every seat in the House of Representatives, 35 Senate seats, and 36 governorships, not to mention several more down-ballot races for attorneys general, state legislatures, and school boards.
The people who win tonight's election will make decisions for you on abortion, climate change, healthcare, education, the economy, and the management of the 2024 presidential elections.
It's all about turnout. It's the only issue. Who's going to show up to vote?
This hour will take you to the critical battleground state of Wisconsin.
He's not the person who's thinking about you and knows you and sees you, and he should not be your senator from Wisconsin.
Plus, we'll put some of this cycle's top issues into perspective in a competitive Illinois district.
The boundary lines are, to me, utterly ridiculous.
And we'll break down what's on voters' minds in the Illinois governor's race.
All that is coming your way on the Northwestern News Report's Election Night Special.
It's your election news, results, and analysis right now. Good evening and welcome to the Northwestern News Report's Election Night Special. I'm Gabrielle Coriati.
And I'm Jenny Ha. It's 7 p.m. here in the Central Time Zone. We've got a number of poll closings to get to.
Polls are now closed in 16 states, plus the District of Columbia. They're also closed in some important local races we're watching tonight. Still waiting for Illinois 9th House Representative and Governor, the Illinois governor race between Pritzker and, between Governor J.B. Pritzker and his opponent. That would be candidate Bailey. And speaking of the, we're also still waiting for the results in the race for this House of Representatives seat between Rice and Schakowsky. And we're still also looking and waiting in the race between Governor Ron DeSantis and his opponent Charlie Crist in Florida, as well as in the Florida Senate race. There's currently 63% of the vote in. Rubio is in the lead, but it is also too close to call that race at the moment, it is too early to call. And speaking of this district, NNN's Logan Schijano is at the Evanston Public Library, where voters have been casting their ballots all day. Logan, we know polls have just closed. What are you seeing?
Gabrielle, we just had a chance, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, to talk to one of the election judges here inside the Evanston Public Library, and she explains a little bit about what takes place now that voting is officially closed. She tells me that they shut down all the equipment and a receipt actually prints out from all of their scanners, and that shows the total number of votes that were registered here in the polling place. They actually take that receipt and then they go over to the voting machines and they look at the physical number of ballots that were cast, and they compare the number of ballots with the number that's on the receipts, the number of people that checked in, just to make sure everything looks right, everything's all as it should be. If that is the case, then they pack up all the physical ballots, all the receipts, all the equipment in these seal bags, which are very protective. Then they take those bags over to the Evanston Civic Center, which we talked about is over on Ridge Avenue. That's where more of the election hub in this area is. There they're doing another check before they actually input these results into the system. Now, that's all the in-person votes that happened here today. There's also the mail-in vote, the absentee ballots. And here in Illinois, those votes, those mail-in votes, can't actually get started. They can't actually start counting those votes until 7 p.m. right now when the polls close. So don't be surprised if the early vote, when the results start coming here early on, especially in the governor's race, don't be surprised if the red candidates, the Republicans, start to take an early lead, because as we know, Democrats traditionally vote more by mail. So don't be surprised if it takes a little bit more time for those votes to start getting counted. And speaking of the governor's race, while J.B. Pritzker did have a significant lead in polls leading up to this race, Darren Bailey knows that he needs all the Republican support that he can get, and he is based more down in the south of Illinois. He's actually from Louisville, Illinois, and hasn't actually campaigned very much here in the north of Evanston area. But we did have a chance to talk to a Republican voter here earlier, and she actually told us that she was not voting for Darren Bailey in this election. Take a listen why.
I've known a lot of politics from central Illinois. Anybody around Springfield, forget it. Forget it. You know, people don't like Mr. Pritzker because he has money or this or that. I certainly have no hostility toward anyone who's worked for the money and isn't using mine.
So, very interesting answer there from one of the people we talked to earlier, and like we said, that race, we should be getting results very soon. Gabby?
All right, Logan, thank you so much.
Well, the time is now 7:05, and we have some of our first results of the night. Illinois governor results are in, although it is we do not have data yet actually, but Governor J.B. Pritzker, who is the current incumbent, is projected to win. And in the Illinois Senate race, Tammy Duckworth is projected to win as well. Back to Florida, where 63% of the votes are in. Governor Republican incumbent DeSantis has 56% of the votes and is leading, while Charlie Crist has 44% of the votes. And in the Florida Senate race, Senator Marco Rubio has about 54% of the votes, while Democratic challenger Val Demings has 45% of the votes. And going back to Georgia, that key state we're looking at in terms of flipping the Senate, Stacey Abrams, Democratic candidate, has 55% of the votes. And Brian Kemp, who is the current Republican incumbent, has 45% of the votes. And going to the governor's race, this would be the Senate race. Raphael Warnock has 58% of the votes, while Herschel Walker has 40% of the votes.
And then next, taking a look at the North Carolina Senate race. There's currently 31% of the vote in. Beasley has that lead with 58%. While Bud is at 41%. Now we're still waiting to hear about the Texas governor race. There is no data in about that race at this moment. Standing by for us all night long is NNN's Max Rothfeder. He'll be breaking down the numbers and the map as things come in. Max, what will you be watching for tonight?
Yeah, Gabrielle, that's exactly right. So I want to turn to one of the next key races, and that's one you just talked about. That's the Georgia Senate. So right now, it's early. We can't really say anything. Only 14% in. Warnock has an early lead, but I want to look back through some of the history. So let's take a look in the 2020 special election. That's when Raphael Warnock last ran, and of course he won. He's the current senator. And we can see he did really well in the Atlanta and its surrounding counties. Fulton County, DeKalb County. That's going to be really important, and I'll show you why here. Let's take a look back. 2014, that's the last Senate race where a Republican won. And we can see here in this Atlanta area, the Republican did really well, especially in these northern counties. That's compared with in 2020 when Raphael Warnock kind of struggled in these counties. He did really well. And so that's kind of the difference here, right? When the Democrat does well in Atlanta and its surrounding counties, it tends to go blue. When the Republican's able to win in some of those suburbs of Atlanta, that's when a Republican does well. So that's really what we're going to be looking for as the results come in. Now, the Georgia governor is another key race. It'll be a good indicator of what we're going to see throughout the night. Still only 14% in there as well. Abrams does have a bit of a lead with 55%. Too early to make any predictions, but it's a similar story there. Now, this race is actually a rematch of Brian Kemp versus Stacey Abrams from 2018. And I want to talk again about those key counties, right? In the Atlanta area, we've got Fulton County, DeKalb County, Gwinnett County. Those are the Atlanta and its suburbs. That's really key to what's going to win. It's the same story in the Senate. It's the same story in the gubernatorial race. We've also got Savannah down here. That's a big one for the Democrats. So we're going to see what happens. Of course, in 2018, Brian Kemp won, and he won because he was able to maintain the majority of the lead. Of course, it's blue here, but he didn't have as strong but Stacey Abrams wasn't able to do quite as well in Atlanta. She's going to have to pick up votes there if she wants to win. So that's what we're watching in the Georgia races. We'll have more as the results come in. Back to y'all.
Thanks for that, Max. I know we'll be checking in with you a lot throughout the night. I want to bring in now NNN political analysts Zach Kessel and Vanessa Kelson. Thank you both so much for being here. So my first question is for you, Zach. Let me start with you. What defines a good night for both political parties?
Well, I think at this point it's a foregone conclusion that Republicans are going to take the House, and then the question becomes what their margin is. Now, 538 projects the average Republican result to be a 17-seat gain for a 230-seat majority in the House to Democrats holding 205 seats. Now, obviously, Kevin McCarthy is going to want that margin to be bigger than that because his chance at the speakership is in jeopardy if the Freedom Caucus members, for example, align themselves behind someone like Jim Jordan for the speakership. So that's really the thing to watch where the House is concerned. Now, where the Senate is concerned, I think I would rate this as somewhere between toss-up and lean Republican for the national Senate campaigns. I would not be entirely surprised, though, if Republicans could bring their tally up to 54, 55 seats by the end of the night. So we'll see.
All right, and so my next question, Vanessa, is for you. What are some of the issues that you think are really driving people to the polls?
Sure, I think there are sort of three primary issues for both Democrats and Republicans. The top two are going to be the same across the aisle. Economy. A lot of people are really struggling under this inflation. The next thing being democracy. Now, Democrats are going to sort of define that democracy as voting rights, accessibility, as well as Jan 6 prosecutions. Republicans might be more so defining that democracy as voter fraud, investigating that. But then sort of on those last issues, that's where Republicans and Democrats differ. For Democrats, abortion has been a huge galvanizing factor. I was in Wisconsin just 2 weekends ago with voters telling me that they're voting for the very first time in their entire lives solely because of abortion. For Republicans, they're throwing it back to a top issue for them, talking about rising crime and how they're going to combat that.
Thanks, Vanessa. So, Zach, I know Vanessa mentioned it a little bit with those Wisconsin voters that are turning out for the first time because of the issues, but how do you think some of these issues are really going to impact that voter turnout?
Right. I think I'm much more skeptical than Vanessa is about the impact abortion will have on the races tonight. Now, you got to think about the two key questions with midterm elections. Number one, are voters happy with the state of the country right now? If not, who can they blame? Now, since January 2021, when President Biden took office and Democrats captured both houses of Congress, that answer, who can they blame, has been Democrats. Now, that shifted a little bit over the summer with the Dobbs decision, and a lot of people want to attribute that to the issue of abortion itself. But I think it's more about that for a brief period of time, it felt, because of Republican appointees on the Supreme Court, because Trump was back in the news, it felt like Republicans were in charge again. The American people didn't like it, and that's why we saw polls narrow over the summer. Now, since then, there's been a bit of a vibe shift, if you will, and Democrats have lost numbers in the polls to Republicans as attention has traveled back toward inflation, toward crime. And I don't think that anyone who would have been motivated to vote because of the issue of abortion wouldn't already have been voting for Democrats. Now, you got to remember, as unpopular as the national Republican position on abortion is, right, a full and total abortion ban, the Democratic position is just as unpopular. A lot of these candidates are running on unlimited abortion, which is just as the Republican total ban position, simply out of step with the American people.
All right, so my next question is for both of you. Are there any particular races that you're really focused on tonight?
Absolutely. So talking about how I was just in Wisconsin, I think that's going to be a huge race to watch tonight. Something pretty peculiar just happened. Marquette Law School just released their polls for this week. A week out from the election, they predicted Ron Johnson at 50 with Mandela Barnes at 48. That gap between the two candidates actually tightening, which typically doesn't happen this close out to the election. So it's definitely a toss-up according to the stats, and it'll be curious to see how that one plays out.
What about you, Zach?
I'm going to bring things over to the House. I think there are two races that we should be looking at. Number one is the Virginia 2nd, where polls closed at 6 p.m. Central, and votes are not entirely in. The race hasn't been called, but incumbent Elaine Luria, whose campaign has been focused around abortion entirely, she is an incumbent Democrat, is losing to Jen Kiggins, who focused her campaign entirely around inflation. So I think that's a good marker of where the American electorate is right now. You have these two national strategies coming head to head in a district that Biden won by 2.1 points in 2020. That's a good marker of how the rest of the night's going to go. Similarly, the Maryland 6th district is another one that'll tell us how things will shape up. Polls closed at 7 p.m. Central. I don't think we have results in yet for that. But incumbent David Trone has similarly made his campaign about abortion, whereas challenger Neil Parrott has talked about inflation. So those two races will tell us where the mood of the electorate is as the night goes on.
Thank you both so much for joining us. Don't go away. There's much more of our election special to come. After the break, we'll check in on a local results watch party.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how sketch is me? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, Backpack Kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Worried about your friend, but don't know how to reach out?
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR, it's all good. If you think you should check in, yeah, you should.
Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Yo, camping buddy. Okay, you guys ready?
Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving. I definitely can't drive.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at the results for Illinois' 9th Congressional District. That's the one for right here in Evanston right now. Now, those results, it seems, are not in yet. It is still too early to call. There is 0% of the vote in, and so 0% for each of the candidates. But we will be going live to NNN's Julia Richardson, who is at Representative Jan Schakowsky's watch party. Julia is standing by in downtown Evanston restaurant Prairie Moon. Julia, what's the mood there?
Said downtown Evanston at Prairie Moon. This party was actually put on by Indivisible Evanston. People just started showing up a little bit ago, including state representatives Robin Gable and Jennifer Gong-Gershwitz, who I just got to ask a few questions to. They said that they are hoping to keep Illinois blue all the way from the local level to the federal level, and they're hoping that Illinois can keep their protections on women's reproductive health, especially since other states around Illinois, the protections are a little bit less secure. So they are hoping that by keeping Illinois blue all the way up, that they will be able to keep those protections all the way through. And Jan Schakowsky is supposed to be here tonight. She has yet to show up, but we have been talking to some people that have been here, and we will have more updates for you later. Back to you in the studio.
Julia, thank you so much, and we will be back with you later, and hopefully Representative Jan Schakowsky will be there when we do.
And moving down the road to the state capitol in Springfield, we're keeping an eye on the Illinois governor's race. Darren Bailey is challenging Governor J.B. Pritzker, who is seeking a second term. The race has been called. Governor J.B. Pritzker, who is a current incumbent, is the projected winner, 63% of the votes. Darren Bailey, who was a GOP challenger, has 35% of the votes. However, the AP projects Pritzker to win once again. Both candidates are plotting very different paths for Illinois, especially when it comes to top issues of abortion, crime, and economy and inflation. So joining me now to break down some of those top issues of the governor's race in the state are NNN's Paris Franzway and Lance Wilhelm. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you, Jenny.
So first question, we are going to start with you, Paris, on crime. Bailey has made Chicago violence a central theme of his campaign. He's criticized local Democratic leaders and labeled the city a, quote, hellhole and, quote, Pritzkerville. So what would be the impact on crime policy if Pritzker or Bailey wins?
Yeah, so after the Highland Park Parade shooting earlier this summer, Pritzker has really doubled down on his gun control policy and does want to enact an assault weapons ban. He also has plans to reform his controversial Safety Act, which he did speak about in a recent debate. Let's take a look.
I support the Safety Act. Again, we ought to amend it appropriately and make sure that we're ending cash bail while keeping murderers, rapists, and domestic abusers in jail.
Now, as for Bailey, he is basically in direct opposition to Pritzker on all of his crime policy. He is completely opposed to all aspects of Pritzker's Safety Act, and as a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, he is opposed to any further ban on assault weapons or guns in general.
Thanks so much, Paris. That's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the race. Now, Lance, moving on to you and abortion. Governor Pritzker is a strong protector of abortion rights within our state, Illinois. How might access to abortion change if he loses the election?
Right, so abortion rights in the state of Illinois have actually been protected on the state level since 2019 through the Reproductive Health Act, which among other things established, quote, a fundamental right to abortion in Illinois. It established protections for healthcare providers who provide abortions to their patients and ensured that health insurance covers those who seek an abortion. And that, regardless of what happens tonight, is likely to stay intact simply because in order to do any significant damage to that fundamental right to abortion in Illinois, Republicans will have to take both the state legislature and the governor's seat, which, as is already predicted, is very unlikely to happen. J.B. Pritzker has made an effort since the overturning of Roe v. Wade to make his state a sanctuary state for those coming outside of Illinois. He's increased funding to abortion clinics for those who are actually coming into the state, and that's remained a pretty popular policy.
Right, a key issue that Democrats are really rallying behind. And Paris, going back to you for one final question, inflation and the economy, extremely important to midterm voters across the board. We've seen this in poll after poll. So how does each candidate plan to deal with Illinois' economy?
Yeah, so Bailey is really aligned with other Republicans nationally on economic policy. He has big plans to cut taxes, particularly income taxes and property taxes. He also comes from a long line of farmers in his family, so he has referenced plans to make economic policies that would benefit Illinois' agricultural industry. Now, as for Pritzker, throughout his campaign, he has relied largely on his past economic policies, which would be raising the minimum wage and supporting small businesses. But most recently, he has committed nearly $3 million towards rebuilding Illinois' tourism industry after COVID.
Well, Paris and Lance, thanks again so much for your reporting. We're going to send it back to Gabrielle at the desk.
Thanks, Jenny. Another big issue in this state is gun control. And following this summer's July 4th parade shooting just down the road in Highland Park, I examined the state of gun control in Illinois.
Since January, there have been over 500 mass shootings in the U.S.
Every American in their lifetime will know somebody who was a victim of gun violence. That's ridiculous.
Nancy Rotering is the mayor of Highland Park. During the city's annual 4th of July parade, a gunman killed 7 people and injured more than 30.
It's energized me in a way that I'm not going to step down. I promised my city that I would do this, and I'm not going to stop.
Highland Park instituted an assault weapons ban in 2013. In Illinois, precautions like background checks on all gun purchases, no purchases after a violent offense, and permits to concealed carry give the state the 6th strongest gun laws in the country, according to Everytown for Gun Safety. But this doesn't include an assault weapons ban.
Every day that passes, the risk of another person losing their life to gun violence goes up.
But even if a statewide ban passes,
we're not an island, we're near Indiana, we're within driving distance of Mississippi and Missouri and all these states that really, I don't understand how they approach gun violence in the way that they do.
The federal Bipartisan Safer Communities Act passed this summer, enhancing background checks for gun buyers 18 to 21, inhibiting those convicted of domestic violence against a dating partner from purchasing firearms, and allocating funds to violence intervention, mental health services, and improving red flag laws. Advocates say this legislation is a step in the right direction, but not enough.
It's really important to keep up the urgency about it and to really consider what candidates' gun policies and platforms are when going to the polls.
When casting a ballot, 38% of Americans are considering gun control to be extremely important this election cycle.
Voting is obviously a huge way that we can play a part in helping to shape our democracy and our futures. especially in terms of the gun issue.
And in a city in recovery,
a lot of them are talking about making sure that the people that they vote for recognize and understand the depth of the pain that the communities experience.
using their vote to say never again.
Governor J.B. Pritzker, who is the projected winner in Illinois, has spoken previously in favor of an assault weapons ban. And coming up, what is this that you're looking at on your screen? Spoiler alert, it's not a shape you'll learn in simple geometry class, but maybe in political science? The answer when the Northwestern News Network's Election Night Special returns.
At Northwestern, we're wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Welcome back. Before the break, we asked you what this shape is. It's actually Illinois' new 17th congressional district. The people in this region will help decide the balance of power in the House. Congressional districts in Illinois and across the country were redrawn after the 2020 census, resulting in that shape we just showed you. NNN's Jeremy Fredericks explains the accusations of gerrymandering in some of these redrawn districts.
Every 10 years, each state redraws their congressional districts to account for population changes after the census. Some states use independent commissions, others allow state legislators to draw the map. This gives politicians the opportunity to redraw districts to favor their party. Let's focus on Illinois, where the Democratic-led state legislature redrew the map last year following the 2020 census. In Congress, the state lost a seat in the U.S. House and now has 17. The new districts are spread out Republican voters and turned toss-up seats blue. Tonight, Democrats are expected to win 3 additional seats, and Republicans are projected to lose 1. This will make the elections less competitive because there are fewer closer races. This is a common critique of gerrymandering on both parties. Illinois Republicans claim that Democrats stole their seats, but nationally, Democrats say Republicans are doing the same thing.
Creating more safe seats for legislators, and this both helps incumbents and it also helps fuel polarization.
According to CNN, both sides are guilty of gerrymandering nationally. Texas Republicans redrew their map, flipping 10 seats red, while Democrats in Nevada added 2 more seats to their side. This happens across the country and can change the makeup of Congress.
The cycle, we thought that it'd be just kind of outright warfare, but it seems like the Republicans had already gerrymandered and gotten a lot of the gains that they could squeeze out of redistricting in the previous cycles.
More than 200 of the 435 seats were redrawn by court decisions or independent commissions. While it's a little different in each state, bipartisan or nonpartisan groups work to make seats as fair and competitive as possible. For example, Colorado uses an independent commission and its seats are less partisan leaning in 2020 than they were a decade ago.
You have a citizen commission that is really much more independent than a politician commission.
And even on a local level, the new seats can have a big impact.
The district we showed you right after we came back from break looks like this. It's pretty clear this is gerrymandered. As we mentioned, it's Illinois' 17th congressional district, and it underwent redistricting by Democrats last year. NNN's Logan Schijano traveled there to find out how the district boundaries impact the political landscape.
As a former engineer, Winnebago County GOP Chair Paul Hoffman knows how to make things work.
We need to be able to listen to people that may upset us.
And in Illinois' 17th congressional district, there's likely just as many people who agree with you as people who don't. Outside of the district's Democratic cities like Rockford and Peoria, Republican agriculture and industry lead the way. That divide makes politics and policy within the district all about compromise.
It's probably about 44% Democrat, maybe 42% Republican as it's currently configured.
In 2020, former President Donald Trump carried the district, but it sent Democrat Cheri Bustos to the House.
It's a complicated dynamic.
Esther Joy King ran against Bustos last cycle. She lost by 4 points, but now, with Bustos retiring, King looks to win the seat over her Democratic opponent, Eric Sorensen.
Here's the rain that's coming in here.
Sorensen is a former weatherman and wants more aggressive action on climate change.
The fact that Eric Sorensen's sort of a popular kind of a TV meteorologist, I believe he was, that should work to his advantage.
King has a military background. She's pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and supports less government spending.
Our desire from the Republican standpoint is to let business loose, increase production of oil and gas. I think she'd be a great voice in the Congress to support those type of initiatives.
Hot-button national issues take center stage for voters in the district, but it depends on who you talk to.
I know right now, honestly, it's like health equity is the main thing you're going to hear all over the place.
The reason I'm voting for Esther King is things aren't free. When you forgive the loans, they ain't forgiven. They're merely passed on to me.
The manufacturing economy is a big issue here. Over 50,000 people hold manufacturing jobs in the district, including some at this Stellantis car plant.
We're very proud of the workforce here. We won a JD Power Award for quality.
Workers fighting for the right to organize, while businesses are vying for free enterprise.
The American dream is still there if you work. It's about less cost, less unionized cost.
Democrats like County Party Chair Charlie Lascanas have a more optimistic outlook.
We still have the lowest unemployment rate we've ever had, or we've had in, let's say, the last few decades, right? The economy seems to be doing well.
When I'm getting punched in the face by Nancy Pelosi, I know I'm doing something right.
Both campaigns using ads to provoke fear.
But Eric Sorensen stands with the anti-police movement, who wants to end cash bail and set violent criminals free.
Right now, the storm is in Washington. The Supreme Court taking away a woman's right to choose. Politicians who only want to stoke hatred and division.
While critical campaign ads are nothing new in politics, the District 17 boundaries are. This is the first election cycle with new district boundaries drawn by Democrats in 2021. Here in District 17, the new lines are designed to maximize the number of urban voters, like here in Rockford, while the larger area is mainly rural.
The biggest change is the sort of tail that moves into Bloomington.
Two parties seeing the new lines in two ways.
The boundaries lines are, to me, utterly ridiculous.
The Republicans who complain about it here, maybe we should take a look at the states that they gerrymander in the United States, right? I'm not going to apologize.
At the end of the night, one candidate will win the ticket to Washington. But Hoffman says the 17th district doesn't win until the sides forget their feuds and find some common ground.
It's a delicate balance between values being strong and not wavering due to political pressure, but yet finding those areas where we can come to some sort of solutions.
In Rockford, Illinois, Logan Schijano, Northwestern News Network.
And we should know NNN did reach out to both the Sorensen and King campaigns leading up to the election, but neither campaign agreed to an interview.
Staying in the Rockford area, manufacturing dominates the economy of the region. And as we know, the economy is the top issue this election cycle. A Gallup poll finds nearly half of registered voters consider the economy extremely important to their vote. Joining me now is NNN's Andrew Rowan. Andrew, I don't think we always associate Illinois with manufacturing, but that's not the case, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we hear a lot about the economy on the macro level with the statistic you just heard, but obviously inflation and rising prices are a driving force in this election. But I wanted to head out and see what else was on voters' minds. About 2 hours west of Chicago, the community college in Rockford, Illinois has a pitch for local employers.
To upskill your employees and then build your culture in that side of the employer so they stick around.
Rock Valley College opened this 77,000 square foot facility that's modeled after what you'll find in local plants. It's got robots, welding equipment, and computer-controlled machinery.
This goes from measurement and milling parts all the way to, complete numerical controls.
Manufacturing makes up over a third of this region's economic output.
And people that are used to the Chrysler plant being thriving and open, that's a huge stressor for them because they see the ecosystem changing.
That plant is a 5.3 million square foot facility that leaves a huge physical and economic footprint on this community. Just a few years ago,
it was a prosperous time. The workers were making money, there was overtime to be had, profit sharing checks were very good.
But now,
the last 4 years we've lost almost 5,000 jobs.
It's not for a lack of talent. The plant won J.D. Power's Award for Quality in 2020. They were the only assembly plant in the company to do so.
It's very demoralizing, and unfortunately our morale is not very good right now.
Today, about 1,500 currently work on the production of the Jeep Cherokee. But production on that vehicle is set to end in June.
As of right now, they have not announced any new product either, so that puts us very much in limbo. We are in need of help.
The union wants that help to come in the form of federal government tax breaks to the car company. They say jobs are going elsewhere. For example, the next generation Dodge Charger and Challenger are being made in Canada. The union says that country offered a lot more incentives.
I almost feel embarrassed, but that's the way of the world nowadays. Unfortunately, with all the businesses, it's almost becomes a bidding war.
Manufacturing here supports a lot of other industries, like this bar behind me. Local leaders say whoever's elected this cycle is going to determine the livelihoods for people years down the line.
I was on the county board.
Republican County Supervisor Gary Jury thinks unions contribute to the problem.
And that's what drives our cost up.
But he agrees they'll need federal dollars for help.
But we need to have a limitation on how much they're going to help and how much you're going to produce.
Winnebago County GOP Chair Paul Hoffman disagrees.
We're looking maybe too much to the government to solve our problems. We need to realize that we have a creative energy and an ability to achieve our dreams, our goals.
Democrats like County Chairman Charlie Lasconis acknowledge the Chrysler plant has its problems, but say manufacturing here overall is doing well.
Things are on the upswing here. Downtown is 12, 15 years ago was a ghost town here.
He cites gains in aerospace manufacturing, which currently employs about 4,300. General Mills just broke ground on a new distribution center. That'll create about 65 new full-time jobs.
Joe Biden, one of his key things was to bring manufacturing back to the United States, and he's doing it. It's not just empty rhetoric.
He blames job losses at the plant on corporate greed. But for those workers, the blame game doesn't solve the problem.
We're at the point where it's going to take more than just us, unfortunately, to get us out of this.
And as the last day of production approaches in June, Rockford leaders will be spinning their wheels trying to find a solution. Andrew Rowan at Northwestern News Network.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for that report. Speaking of unions, last month, Gabby and I reported on Northwestern University's graduate workers unionizing. Today, Illinois residents are voting on a constitutional amendment that could impact workers' rights and labor unions across the state. NNN's Stravia Bunt explains.
Graduate Student Union.
Last month, Northwestern University graduate workers, or NUGW, rallied for workers' rights and officially launched their unionization efforts.
We've been launching an active union card collection campaign over the last month to actually file for official recognition from the university.
On November 8th, a game-changing workers' rights amendment to the Illinois Constitution is on the ballot. Illinois Amendment 1, the right to collective bargaining measure, would ratify employees' rights to negotiate wages, hours, and working conditions through chosen representatives.
The Workers' Rights Amendment is an effort to lock into place the benefits that have helped middle-class Illinois citizens for many decades.
It would also codify a right-to-work ban into the state constitution.
It's just very interesting how folks have coined it right to work, which means basically that it takes away people's abilities to have a union. That's not a right to work, that's taking away rights.
Many Illinois unions, like the Chicago Teachers Union, Associated Firefighters, and Service Employees International Union, are expressing support.
It gives us the ability to organize, to freely have unions in our workplace, to have safer working conditions.
However, Wisconsin codified the right to organize for public sector unions in 1959, but in 2010, the state's Republican majority passed a law to restrict these rights.
We don't want Illinois to become the next Wisconsin.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Illinois Democrats, and the Vote Yes for Workers' Rights campaign are pushing for Amendment 1. Some voters are responding positively.
We've been out knocking on doors and in from members of the public. We've generally heard good things.
Vote Yes for Workers' Rights received 6 times as much money in financial contributions compared to the Vote No campaign. Amendment 1 is particularly popular with young voters. 80% of voters ages 18 to 34 said they will vote yes, according to a poll by WCIA, The Hill, and Emerson College. But some oppose the amendment for 2 main reasons: concerns about tax increases, and how Amendment 1 would mean employers could require their workers to pay union dues. Union leaders responded to those concerns.
The Supreme Court of the United States, in the Janus decision, has said that no worker can be forced to pay union dues if they don't want to pay union dues. So there's no one in Illinois that can be forced to join a union.
Teachers can already form unions, can already engage in collective action, and they haven't done anything to push property taxes any higher.
Proponents highlight the right to work ban, union support, and greater employee advocacy as key benefits of the amendment.
I'm just really excited about what's coming to the citizens of Illinois, that they're getting rights incorporated into their constitution.
Shravya Pant, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Shravya. The Workers' Rights Amendment will require a 60% vote to be ratified. NNN's Max Rothweather will give us a check of the races he's keeping an eye on. Don't go away, coming up after the break.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Welcome back. A busy night already here in Illinois with 8% of the vote in. AP has projected Democrat Tammy Duckworth to win the Senate race. Duckworth has 61% of the vote, while Salvi has 38%. Now let's send it over to Max at the big board.
Max, what are you keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so I first want to talk about the House. We haven't talked about it too much. The net gain was 5. That's now down to 2. So far, Republicans have already picked up 3 seats. Now in Texas, it's been a close race. It's going back and forth. We're only at 15% in. There was just an update. Abbott's now up a little bit, but it's going back and forth throughout the night. But I want to talk about what both candidates need if they want to win. So let's take a look back the last time Beto ran. That was in the Senate race in 2018 against Ted Cruz. He does really well here in this portion of Texas along the border. He also does well in Houston and Dallas and the Fort Worth area, but he struggles in a lot of central Texas and a lot of those rural areas. Of course, we can see here, I have the counties listed out. Harris County, that's Houston right here. He does really well. He has almost 200,000 more votes. Dallas County, a similar story. But he's got to pick it up in places like Denton County. That's right up here north of the Dallas-Fort Worth area if he wants to have a chance. And this is why. Greg Abbott, this is the last time he ran back in 2018. He actually did not do too well along the southern border and was still able to win the state. So Beto clearly does well along the border, but he's going to have to pick up seats in the areas in the Houston area and the Dallas area and even in the Austin area if he wants to have a chance to take Abbott. It's not looking good based on the polls right now. Now, Florida governor, we called it, Ron DeSantis. We also called the Senate race, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why Republicans have been doing so well in Florida. So let's take a look back. The last time that Ron DeSantis ran, look at this. He wins in all of these rural areas, and he doesn't lose by a lot here in the Miami-Dade area, in the Orlando area. We have a similar story back in 2014. That's when Rick Scott ran against Charlie Crist, who was the one challenging Ron DeSantis again, the former governor of Florida, tried again. Like I said, we called it, he lost. But you can see here, the Democrats just are not winning enough seats in these major cities. Jacksonville actually went Republican back in 2014. We can see the comparison here. In 2018, it almost feels as though, Democrats did a little bit better up in the Jacksonville area, but are struggling. And we saw, like we said, we already called it tonight for Ron DeSantis. Florida's looking really Republican. And so as we go into future elections, it's going to be interesting to see how Florida sort of balances the power. So in the Senate, again, we've talked about these key races: Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania. Got the 4 listed right here. We haven't been able to call those yet. Florida, we called. That's one of the other 5 I'm keeping an eye on. Right now, it's 38-37. No surprises yet in the Senate, but we're going to keep an eye on that. Of course, we called the Florida Senate race. Rubio, was able to take down Demings. So that's all I've got for now. We're going to head over back to Gabrielle.
Thanks, Max. And just like Max, students on campus are definitely watching this election, and one residential college is even hosting a watch party. NNN's Ellie Skelly is at North Mid-Quads now. They're having an Election Day watch party. Ellie, what's the energy like there?
Hi, Gabby. People here at the North Mid-Quads or the Public Affairs Res College are really excited to be able to gather and watch these elections. They just handed out pizza provided by the residential colleges and drinks, and they're about to gather for a game of Guess That Tweet, where they're going to be guessing tweets from famous politicians running tonight. They're also going to be later gather for a night of bingo. CNN is currently on in the background, and everybody says they're tuned in and they're nervous about the elections and the results, but they're also excited to be able to gather here together. Some races that people are watching here include the Pennsylvania race of Fetterman versus Oz, as well as here locally in Illinois, the race Bailey versus Pritzker. So definitely students are excited about this election.
Thanks, Ellie. We'll be back with you more later in the night.
He's not the person who's thinking about you and knows you and sees you, and he should not be your senator from Wisconsin.
President Barack Obama was out on the campaign trail in Wisconsin trying to get out the vote for Democrats. Also on the campaign trail, our own NNN reporters. Hear what they learned right after the break.
Worried about your friend but don't know how to reach out?
You could say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR. It's all good if you think you should check in. Yeah, you should.
Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Anything, buddy? Okay, you guys ready?
Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving.
I definitely can't drive.
Okay.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
Roughly 57 miles north of Chicago lies the state of Wisconsin. Known for both its cheese and Badgers football sports culture, it's also considered a swing state in elections, with Democrat-leaning metropolitan cities like Milwaukee and Madison and conservative rural counties like Waukesha and Washington. It really is a toss-up. But it's a place Democrats have been working to win big, even bringing former President Barack Obama to campaign. Vanessa Kelson has the story.
Former President Barack Obama hit the road campaigning for Democratic candidates in the midterms.
Consider the fact that democracy is also on the ballot.
In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, thousands turned out to hear him speak on October 29th.
Of course, I want to see Barack Obama. Because I've missed hearing him talk. I just love listening to him talk.
Joining Obama on stage was Senate candidate and current Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, who emphasized key issues this election.
Any politician that wants to take away a woman's right to choose, who wants to put our Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block, or send our Wisconsin jobs out of state or overseas, does not deserve our consideration.
Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, who's up for re-election, echoed Barnes, saying,
"I'll always trust women to make these decisions for themselves."
Voters at the rally agreed.
I just recently found out I'm expecting, and to know that the resources wasn't provided to me in this state, it was such like a conflicting feeling, honestly.
Barnes is up against Republican incumbent Ron Johnson. Polls show the two candidates are neck and neck in the race.
We all going to turn our backs on Ron Johnson.
Democrat Senator Tammy Baldwin showed her support for Barnes.
I cannot think of a better person to be my partner in the United States Senate.
Democrats hope Obama will galvanize blue voters, helping cinch tight midterm races.
Barack Obama is not on the ballot this year, but a lot of the ideas that he fought for, the policies he fought for, the future he fought for is on the ballot in 2022.
But notably absent, President Joe Biden. Only joining large rallies in a few states, many outlets are saying his absence is a symptom of low approval ratings. Meanwhile, Obama has headlined 6 campaign events condemning the state of the Republican Party.
Republican politicians, they're not interested in solving problems. They're interested in making you angry and then finding somebody to blame. And they're hoping that that'll distract you from the fact that they don't have any answers of their own.
Former President Barack Obama just finished speaking on the stage behind me, encouraging voters to get out and vote as soon as possible, naming reproductive issues, democracy, voting rights, and health care all at stake.
Thank you, Vanessa. Obama spoke in Milwaukee, a relatively blue city, but Wisconsin also has a lot of purple counties divided between blue and red. The WOW counties, as they're known, Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington, which you can now see on your screen, border Milwaukee to the north and west. Traditionally known as Republican strongholds, the margin between Democratic and Republican voters significantly decreased in 2020. NNN's Julia Richardson visited a town in Waukesha County to show us why.
Welcome to Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, where early voting is underway at City Hall.
Everybody's nice. They want to do their share.
They take their application that they filled out and they go to the window.
Diane Conan has been city clerk for 20 years. Her goal, to make the voting process as smooth as possible.
I'm happy to take any phone call, answer any email, meet with people.
Oconomowoc is part of Waukesha County, one of Wisconsin's WOW counties. Although the counties have traditionally skewed Republican, the margin between Democratic and Republican votes significantly decreased in 2020.
It's still more predominantly a Republican voting community. However, I see that trend kind of changing.
And in a state where candidates have been neck and neck.
This has been going on for probably for always, but to me it's gotten much more heated.
There is more for voters to weigh.
I just feel like there's more at stake now.
First-time poll worker Jessica Monville says she didn't have an interest in politics until recently.
I have 2 daughters. I just don't want them to have less rights than I did growing up.
As voting practices have shifted, so have election officials' duties.
Nobody was staffed to handle the deluge of all the mail-in ballots. That's a stress on any clerk's office and on our budget.
Poll workers say the process has been mostly smooth, but Economwalk is not immune to fears surrounding voter fraud sweeping the nation.
We have a machine jam, and the chief inspector at the poll has to open the machine to get the ballots pulled out, and someone in line saw that and decided that they were taking ballots out and putting other ballots in the machine because they didn't know what they were doing.
Conan says confrontations have also become more common.
They're approaching me more on you're doing it wrong and we know you are.
But poll workers say they are happy to offer transparency about the process to those skeptical.
People who are passionate about the right to vote aren't here to screw the voters.
Julia Richardson, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Julia. As we've shown you already, in elections like these, every single vote counts, and that means doing your best to campaign to all Americans. This includes Latino voters. They're an integral part of the Wisconsin electorate as the fastest growing population bloc in the state. NNN's Diego Ramos-Pichara tells us more.
El voto latino decidirá. The Latino vote will decide. A chant that echoed across Milwaukee's south side. We want people who will support us, and we want to cause change. In this predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, Latino voters, young and old, want to make their voices heard in the midterm elections.
We have a lot of other options: canvassing, phone banking. We need you. We need you. I need you.
The rallying issue? Immigration.
The main issue that I'm voting for is immigration reform. Más que nada en estos momentos es migración.
Christine Neumann Ortiz is Voces de la Frontera Action's executive director, a progressive group working to mobilize Latino voters.
Our allegiance is to the community, and our allegiance is to the dreamers, to the essential workers, to the Latino people of color.
She endorses Democrat Mandela Barnes for the U.S. Senate.
That's all I needed.
To talk directly. So he has a very strong record of supporting immigrant rights. His platform right now is that he has strong support for immigration reform with a path to citizenship for 11 million.
Wisconsin's Latino population is growing. State data shows they've grown by 46.8% since the 2000 census, a rate nearly 10 times faster than the state's overall population. In 2020, Latinos for the first time were Wisconsin's largest minority group, making up 7.1% of the population. This has left Republicans and Democrats alike vying for their vote. Heller Tosti is the founder of Operación Vamos. It's an outreach initiative sponsored by the National Republican Senatorial Committee to turn out Latino voters in key battleground states.
About if there's problems that they're seeing in their community, to actually do something about it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
But I want to get information. I'm actually here. Hispanic issues are American issues, right? They're worried about what everyone else is worried about. They're worried about, can they feed their families? Is their job good? Are they safe?
For Tosti, that means supporting incumbent Senator Ron Johnson. Sentiments echoed by Mario Herrera, a Republican voter from Waukesha.
But if you remove that from the equation, whether you're Democrat or Republican, your bottom dollar is being affected. If you have to maintain a family, when you have to put food on the table, that's what's going to drive you to vote this upcoming election.
The overarching goal of Operación en Voces, to increase Latino voter turnout, shining a spotlight on the population. But the work on the ground in Milwaukee is far from over. According to a Pew Research study, only 40% of Hispanic voters cast a ballot in the last midterm elections. That's out of a total eligible population of 183,000 voters. And for context, that's a much lower turnout than that of white and black voters. Only time will tell if the Hispanic voting bloc has become a force to be reckoned with.
And Diego and Vanessa join us now. Thank you both for being here. Diego, I want to start with you. We just saw that both parties are working so hard to get out the Latino vote. What will they consider a successful night?
Yeah, so as I went over in my package, the Latino population in Wisconsin is only 7% of the total, population of the state, which sounds like a very small number, only that it isn't when you consider that it's the second largest minority bloc. In fact, the population has grown by more or less half since the 2000 census, so it's been growing exponentially over time. That's a trend that we're seeing not just in Wisconsin, but really just nationwide as the Latino population is becoming a wider and more dominant force of the American populace overall. Now, the main concerns here really are that even though it is growing, the attention on behalf of politicians just really isn't there yet. They don't really see them as like a dominant force. That is something that is changing, though. A lot more interest is being put into the Latino vote as a whole, and though it won't really be like a key focus in this particular elections, Republicans spokesperson for the Republican Party have told me that moving forward in 2024 and beyond, sort of advocating and sort of campaigning to this particular electorate will be very, very important. I think really right now both organizations really just want to get out the vote. They really want Latinos to become a force to be reckoned with. They want politicians to actually start caring about this population, and that only happens through voter registration. The more Latinos vote, the more of a priority they become in terms of like politicians and sort of how many resources are sort of outpouring to this community. And so really for right now, it's really just a matter of getting out the vote, convincing people that their voice matters and that united they are stronger, so that moving forward, long-term politicians, Republicans and Democrats can actually start to sort of meet the needs of this particular community moving forward.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. And Vanessa, while you were at the Barnes and Obama event, what were some of the top issues voters spoke about?
Yeah, I would say there were primarily three issues that came up again and again and again. A lot of voters talked about their fear for democracy, which is a little bit of an ambiguous topic. When you press voters a little bit more, they talk about concerns about, will January 6th be prosecuted properly? Will voting accessibility still be open to anyone and everyone? I think sort of another issue is a lot of people getting closer to retirement. Obama made a really big point about this in his speech as well. We all know someone who's probably benefiting from Social Security. So will those benefits be there when we need them and when our loved ones need them? The last one, of course, is abortion, a huge issue. As you saw in my package earlier, I spoke to a woman who recently found out she's expecting, and she was debating whether or not to keep the baby. She did, but she didn't have the proper resources within Wisconsin. She'd have to drive all the way to Waukesha to be able to get them.
And Vanessa, let's talk about the WOW counties. The margins were closer last election season, but what were some of the predictions this time around?
Absolutely. So Wisconsin has always been a true swing state, back and forth, back and forth. The past 3 out of 6 presidential elections have been decided by less than a percentage point. But when it comes to the more local politics within Wisconsin, the Senate races, the gubernatorial races, those tend to be a little less tight, a little bit more clear cut. This year, the most recent Marquette Law School poll is suggesting that the gubernatorial race is less than 3 percentage points between candidates. Same for the Senate race, less than 3%. That's the first time in Wisconsin's history ever that both of those races are so tight. So it'll be really fascinating to see what is going to happen tonight, especially with those WOW counties having lesser and lesser margins between Democrats and Republicans.
Well, again, thank you both so much for being here with us today. Gabrielle, we're going to toss it back to you at the desk.
Yeah, so that will wrap up this hour of our special election night coverage. Diego and Melina continue our analysis on the races you care about next.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut, the one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink, or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking, now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed, better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead, catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
I don't know why you're so sad. You've got a roof over your head.
You gotta stop with that depression stuff. That's what white people think. You alright?
It just feels like it's coming from everywhere.
Do you want to talk about it?
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
I'll see y'all. I got some batteries and 2 flashlights.
What's up, champ?
Flashlight is cool.
I feel like you get taller every time I see you. Congratulations, Brandon.
Welcome back. It's 8 p.m. here. It's over 8 p.m. here in Illinois, and polls are closed in many states, including Arizona, Michigan, Texas, and Wisconsin.
And with both parties fighting for majorities in Congress, all eyes are on the House and Senate races in key states.
One of those states is Pennsylvania, where Republican Mehmet Oz takes on Democrat John Fetterman. Our campus partner Jace Bartow from Penn State talked more on what to watch for in this state earlier today.
Pennsylvania is one of the key states to keep an eye on this election cycle, with Dr. Mehmet Oz running on the Republican ticket for Senate against Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman running as the Democratic nominee. This race is neck and neck. Oz has a slim lead in the polls against Fetterman with less than half a point. Both candidates ramped up their campaigning this past weekend throughout Pennsylvania. Fetterman held a rally alongside former President Barack Obama in Pittsburgh, while Oz rallied with former President Donald Trump in Latrobe, Pennsylvania the same day. Why is Pennsylvania such a key state in these elections? Well, if Dr. Oz wins the Senate seat, Republicans could easily get enough seats to have the majority and gain power in the Senate, which is currently run by Democrats by a very slim margin. The Pennsylvania governor's race is a bit of a different story, however. Attorney General Josh Shapiro is running on the Democratic ticket, and according to most polls, he is well ahead of Republican nominee Doug Mastriano by over 10 points. Regardless of the outcome of this election, Pennsylvania is definitely a state that will play a major role in how Joe Biden finishes off his presidential term and how the 2024 presidential election will be impacted. Reporting from University Park, Pennsylvania, I'm Jason Bardo.
Another state we're watching tonight is Florida. For more on the key races there, Anna Kuhn in Miami had a lot more to say earlier in the day.
Thanks, guys. I'm here in Coral Gables at one of the Miami-Dade polling places. And here in Miami, we're watching 3 major races tonight. The first of which is the gubernatorial race between DeSantis and Charlie Crist. DeSantis is expected to win tonight. He has about a 10-point lead over Crist, even after a large push for Democrats during early voting. So it's expected that DeSantis will be serving another term here in Florida. Another big race that we're watching tonight is the Senate race between Val Demings and Marco Rubio. Again, Rubio, as the incumbent Republican, is expected to win. Right now, he's about 8 points ahead of Demings in the polls. But if Demings is able to flip this seat, it would be huge for Democrats nationwide. Florida is pretty much seen as a red state, although in the past, Florida has been a major swing state because so many new Republicans are registered to vote. Florida is pretty much solidly red across the board. So if Demings is able to pull this victory out, it would be huge for Democrats looking to keep the majority in the Senate. And finally, really the only nail-biter that we're watching here in Miami-Dade is a local congressional race between Annette Taddeo and Maria Olivier Salazar. Salazar, again, is the incumbent. She is expected to win, but this race is a lot closer than the other two that we've been watching. I was speaking to Annette Taddeo earlier this year, and she's been talking to voters who are telling her, I'm voting for DeSantis and I'm voting for Rubio, but I'm also voting for you. She's able to pull a lot of Republican moderate votes into her congressional campaign because she's so well known in South Florida, and people really do think that she's going to do a great job in Congress representing this district. That's how it's looking here in Florida, guys. In Coral Gables, I'm Anna Kuhn. Back to you.
Thanks, Anna. Now, another key state in this election cycle is Georgia. Now, there are a number of races we're watching out there, and our own Maria Haim is here now with a breakdown of what's going on in Georgia.
In Georgia, the story is all about ballots tonight. Many swing voters call Cobb County home. It's a crucial area sitting on the border of Alabama, but nearly 700 voters have not received their absentee ballot and will not vote in person tonight. But how are the voters going to cast their vote here? Well, yesterday afternoon, Cobb County agreed to extend the deadline for Georgians who did not reserve their requested ballots. According to ACLU attorney Vasu Abhiraman, the county also faces a similar lawsuit from advocacy group Cobb County Democracy Center. Georgians are also seeing candidates step up in their ads. Democrat Senator Raphael Warnock's new attack ad against his opponent Herschel Walker features top Republicans criticizing his past. Georgia is also going to come down to turnout and how the state receives ballots one way or another.
Thanks, Maria. Now let's get a check on the important races in New York from Citrus TV.
Thanks, guys. Reporting from Citrus TV in Syracuse, New York State is being faced with the question of if Democrat and incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul will stay in her role, or if Lee Zeldin will take her spot and become the first Republican governor since Pataki was last in the role in 2007. Both candidates have focused on pointing out what they say are flaws in policies of the other. Hochul criticizing Zeldin's views on abortion, and Zeldin saying Hochul has not done enough to stop crime in the state. In the polls, Hochul has held the lead throughout their campaigns. But this is not going to be a blowout. Zeldin has continuously climbed over the past months, especially when it comes to his plans for laws on bail reform and cashless bail. Members of Hochul's own party, like New York City Mayor Eric Adams, have heavily criticized her on bail reform. Adams has said time and time again that the system is, quote, broken and allows a catch-and-release practice for criminals. The issues that rank high for voters include crime, abortion, and health care. But the highest-ranking issue is the economy. New Yorkers will decide on Election Day who the next governor will be. Reporting in Syracuse, New York, I'm Tegan Brown.
And moving on, this election cycle is proving to be one of the most contentious in recent history, with a new question of whether candidates will accept the results of their race. We now turn to a rather grim topic, the state of democracy in America, in which voters have ranked as one of their top issues as they cast their ballots. So what's motivated people behind events like the January 6th attack on the Capitol and the more recent threats to government officials is this false belief that the legitimacy of the election process in America has been compromised, that the electoral process is plagued with fraud and corruption, a big lie that Democrats want to cover up. It's important to note, of course, that there has been no proof of widespread election fraud. However, Republicans are continuing to push the idea that the big lie, or pushing the idea of the big lie, something that former President Obama criticized last week in his visit to Milwaukee in an effort to encourage voting efforts there. Let's take a listen.
If you do need another reason to vote, consider the fact that democracy is also on the ballot. They are literally just making stuff up. Mandela's opponent has done more than just about anybody in Congress to spread conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. I mean, he has a gold medal in that event.
Now, this narrative has been perpetuated by Republicans in order to justify their attempts to pass anti-voting legislation. Over 430 bills were introduced in the 2021 legislative sessions, which would do just that, limit things like access to early and mail-in ballot voting, which would, of course, impact how and where millions of Americans vote. Joining us here in the studio are NNN's Leta Peterson and Julia Narvaez Munguia to discuss how threats to democracy are influencing voters in the 2022 midterm election. Thank you both for being here. So let's start with you, Lena. So how has the recent coverage of January 6th and those hearings overall influenced how voters perceive the state of democracy in America?
Thanks, Diego. So the January 6th hearings and the fallout from the insurrection has shaped how voters on both sides of the aisle are viewing the state of democracy in America today. According to the latest New York Times and Siena College poll, roughly 7 in 10 registered voters say that democracy is at risk, but just a tenth of that number, 7%, rank it as the most important problem facing the country. And the further we get from January 6th, the idea of an active threat to our government increasingly subsides. However, the recent coverage of the January 6th hearings has served as a stark reminder of how fragile our democracy truly is. The hearing came at a really pivotal moment due to the fact that if Republicans do gain control of the House tonight, they would undoubtedly disband the committee and shut down any accountability held to government officials. So this threat will certainly play a role in how voters show up to the polls tonight.
Of course. Let's shift gears to social media for a second. Let's go on to Twitter. So Julia, we also know that Elon Musk has been making a lot of changes with Twitter since he very recently bought it. So what are some of the implications of what's been going on in Twitter and what Elon Musk has been doing with the company so far?
Right, so the first thing Elon Musk did was he actually fired 4 top Twitter executives as his first few days as CEO and essentially the entire board of directors here. Now Musk is now the only sole director of Twitter. Now Musk's vision for revolutionizing the company includes creating a social platform where he says that every single political perspective is represented. I mean, Musk calls himself a free speech absolutionist, and he wants to do this by aiming permanent bans like we saw with former President Donald J. Trump. And conservatives are celebrating this move. They really want to see this happening, a platform where they can sound off and do this. But now people on the left are saying, well, where's the line between free speech and hate speech? We saw this again with Musk replying to Michaela Peterson, daughter of conservative commentator Jordan Peterson, asking him to unban her father from the platform. Musk tweeted back and said, quote, "Anyone suspended for minor and dubious reasons will be freed from Twitter jail," raising the question of what will the platform's guidelines be moving on and moving forward as Musk's term as Twitter CEO. Now, Musk plans to do this by implementing a content moderation panel, essentially having people with widely diverse viewpoints essentially dictate what can and can't be said on Twitter. But Musk says that no major content decisions or account reinstatements will happen his first few days as CEO and before that council actually becomes a thing.
Wow, so a lot going on in that sphere. So Lena, back to you. I want to ask you about ballot drop boxes. So how might current threats across the country involving the distribution and the collection of absentee ballots, how would that be impacting voters?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Diego, in states like Texas specifically, which is currently being targeted by right-wing individuals who are aiming to throw out voter registrations or absentee ballots, we are seeing democracy being threatened in our election. According to the Texas Tribune, election administrators in Texas continue to face a level of harassment that was unprecedented in this country prior to the 2020 presidential election. And threats, dangerous misinformation, and a gross lack of resources in these offices are actually causing some election workers to resign from their positions in Texas. And similarly, to vote early in Minnesota, voters are required to have a witness sign with them who could either be a registered voter in Minnesota or a notary, according to the Minnesota Secretary of State. So for those who are college students here at Northwestern or reside elsewhere, this is actually a huge barrier to being able to vote effectively via absentee. So these are 2 states that we will continue to watch as results come out this evening.
Wow. And of course, we can't not talk about the threats to democracy without talking about the horrible attacks on the recently horrible attacks on the husband of Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. So Julia, what do attacks like that say about the state of our democracy?
Yeah, right. As we saw 2 weeks ago, Nancy Pelosi's house was invaded, her husband's skull was fractured, but we actually noticed a recent pattern and a trend. Now, according to the New York Times, in 2021, there were over 9,000 incidents of political violence since the 5 years that Donald Trump took office. Now, violence against politicians isn't new, but this recent uptick tells a lot about the legitimacy of elected leaders and what we are seeing. Now, there's something to be said about the rise of social media and the rise of forums representing, really polarized content and sort of opinions, and it really raises a question, and it's just something we have to monitor in the near future.
Right. Well, thanks to both of you for your wonderful reporting. Only time will tell if Republicans' voter suppression efforts will lead back to conservative victories this election cycle. Melina, back to you.
Thanks, Diego. We'll be taking a close look at more important races when we come back. Don't go away.
Ready, set, yellow.
My narrative, since I've been locked up and kind of made my transition, has been like redemption, accountability.
When I come into the classroom environment, every individual that sits amongst me takes education seriously.
Cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
Welcome back. Polls are officially closed in Illinois. Let's check in with Max Rothfeder at the big board. Max, can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on here?
Yeah, so here in Illinois, there's a few races that we're watching. The Senate race has already been projected. That's for Tammy Duckworth right there. Not a surprise. In the 9th District House, it hasn't been officially called, but we've got Jan Schakowsky with 71%. There's only 28% in. But let's take a quick look at the history. If we look back through the history in the Illinois 9th, Jan Schakowsky back in 2020 had a major lead in the polls there. She won by a lot, 71% to 29 right there. We saw a similar story back in 2018, 73 to 26. So there's no reason to think that Jan Schakowsky won't be able to pull out the race again this year. Now, with respect to the Illinois governor's race, we already have a projected winner there as well. It's J.B. Pritzker with 61%. We only have 10% of the vote in, but we've already been able to call the race. That's from the AP who's made that decision. And let's take a look at a little bit of the history there. So back in 2018, that's the last time J.B. Pritzker ran. Look, he does really well. He wins in the Chicago area. He also does okay around Peoria, Illinois. And we can then take a look ahead right back to 2014. That's the last time a Republican was the governor. And you can see they did okay in Chicago and Cook County, but they really struggled in the rest of the state. They didn't win a single other county outside of Cook County and Chicago. And so that's really what the key was tonight, right? J.B. Pritzker was able to do well in the key counties all across the state, you know, in the middle of the state, outside of Cook County in the Chicago area, even a few counties down there in southern Illinois. So that's what was able to allow him to win tonight. So that's what we got in Illinois. Back to y'all at the desk.
Thanks, Max. One of the big issues in these Illinois races is, of course, immigration. And over the last 2 months, refugees have been arriving on buses from Texas and living in shelters in the Chicago area. NNN's Kunjal Bastola tells us more.
From Texas to Chicago, refugees are arriving, staying at various shelters located around the city in search of comfort and community. One of these shelters is the Leon Beach Fieldhouse located near Rogers Park.
It's used in the summer for the lifeguards, but it's closed to the public. So that was an available spot here in the Rogers Park community.
Shelters like the Leon Beach Fieldhouse are hard at work making sure refugees have a place to live and food to eat. Coordinating shelters and legal arrangements for these refugees is no easy feat.
We have a statewide coalition of partners who have truly met the moment to ensure that Illinois lives up to its history as a welcoming state.
The Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights is helping new refugees by collecting donations, organizing volunteers, and providing legal assistance.
The work to make Illinois one of the most welcoming states for immigrants and refugees has been going on for a very long time. And, you know, we've gotten to where we are because immigrant communities across Illinois have demanded it.
Closer to campus, the Evanston City Council will allocate $500,000 to a new immigrant and refugee welcome center, located at the Family Focus Center on Dewey Avenue.
So ideally in a welcome center, you'll have like the core services that a person who is a new arrival would need, where they are able to provide for their families and for themselves and have stability in their lives.
The Welcome Center is looking to greet new refugees into the city and provide them with resources, including housing and legal counsel, to help them in the long term.
I'm really glad that the council was able to express to the community members that are coming and that have been here that they're welcome, and we want to create a space for them where they can thrive.
Safety, community, and support at the core of local refugee assistance. Kunjal Bastola, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Kunjal, for that reporting. And not far away in downtown Evanston, another watch party is taking place at Prairie Moon. Let's check it out with NNN's Julia Richardson, who is there right now. Julia, what can you tell us about the watch party?
Hi, Melina. So as you can see, since I last talked to you, it has picked up. There are a lot more people here, including Representative Jan Schakowsky. But I did talk to the co-founder of Indivisible Evanston. Her name is Laura Tanner, and I'll show you what she said.
We just have to really band together and work hard here in Evanston. You know, we're in a blue district. We have, we're lucky in Illinois to have really good voting rights, but really our role as Indivisible is to fight for areas outside, even in our state, where they don't have that.
Looks like a lot of fun out there, and it's amazing that we have such a huge turnout, voter turnout in our region. Julia, what can you tell us more about, you said Jan Schakowsky is there. What can you tell us more about how voters are feeling? Okay, we apologize, we're having some technical difficulties, but we're going to head to a short break and we'll be back with more.
Stay with us.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Northwestern break right through that. we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Welcome back to NNN's election night coverage. I'm Gabrielle Coriati.
And I'm Jenny Ha. It's 8:31 now. Time for a check of the results in Texas, Florida, and Illinois. Polls just closed at 8 p.m. in Wisconsin. Let's look at the Texas, Pennsylvania, and Georgia gubernatorial races. In the Wisconsin Senate race, 2% of the votes is in, with Democrat Mandela Barnes in the lead and Republican Ron Johnson with 34%. And in the Wisconsin governor race, 3% of the vote is in. Democrat Evers is in the lead with 59% and Republican Michaels has 41%.
In the Texas governor's race, 41% of the vote is in, with 53% in favor of Abbott and 46% of the vote for O'Rourke. The Pennsylvania governor race is 17% in. Democrat Shapiro has 65% of the vote, and Republican Mastriano has 33%.
And finally, the Georgia governor race is 58% in. Current Governor Brian Kemp is at 52%, and Stacey Abrams is at 48%.
Obviously, there's still a lot of races across the country that we're still watching.
Let's bring in NNN's Max Rothfeder. Max, what's the latest?
Thanks, Jenny. So yeah, we've been talking about the House all night, right? 5. That's the big number we've been watching. Net gain. It's been bouncing back and forth. 2. That's the number right now. Republicans have gained 2 seats. That means they still need 3 more if they want to take back the House. It's been toggling between 2 and 3. We'll see as that progresses throughout the night. Now in the Senate right now, 39-40, still no surprises. Of course, we called Florida, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, Wisconsin. Those are all too early to call. We're getting the results in, so I want to take you through a few of those Senate races right now. Pennsylvania, just 9% in. Fetterman with an early lead, but again, just 9% in. Not too much we can make assumptions about that. Ohio Senate, it's pretty tight. We got Vance and Ryan. Ryan's got a bit of a lead, 54% right now. Again, only 34% in. In North Carolina, we're at 57%, and you can see it's neck and neck. We got 49-49. It's very close. We're going to see what happens there. That's going to be an important state for Democrats, of course, currently held by a Republican. And then in Georgia, that's the big one. Remember, if neither candidate can get 50%, it's going to be a runoff. Right now, both have 49%. You have to have a 50% majority to win it outright. We'll see what happens there. Now, there's one race we haven't done a deep dive into yet, and that's Nevada. So I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about that. So we've got current Senator Catherine Cortez Masto going up against Republican Adam Laxalt. Now, I want to take you back to 2016. That's the last time Cortez Masto ran, and she was able to win. And you can see she won one county, Las Vegas, Cook County. That was it in the entire state. But that is the most populous county. That's the most important county. Now, let's take it back. Adam Laxalt, he ran for governor. He did not win. This is where he went wrong, right? He lost Cook County, but we can also see he lost up here in the Reno area. He's going to have to do better in this race. But so far, it looks like he's going to do it. Now, in 2014, we're looking at the governor's race here. That's the last time a Republican won. Every single county in the state of Nevada is red. That's what we're going to have to see from Adam Laxalt tonight. It's going to be about Cook County. It's going to be about Reno. That's what we're watching here. We'll have more updates for you at the end of the show. Back to y'all at the desk for now.
Max, thank you so much. Let's check back in with Ellie Skelly, who was at a campus watch party. Ellie, what are some of the new updates?
Hi, yes, this watch party is still happening here in the NMQ, or the Public Affairs Residential College. Students are still gathered here in the main area, living area, and then also in a separate living area. CNN is on the background behind me, and NBC is being watched also in the other room. But students are also kind of gathering. They're playing pool. They're doing their homework while watching the elections. It's still Tuesday night at Northwestern after all. And that some key elections that people are tuned into again are the Texas election and then also the Pennsylvania election. The Texas election between Beto O'Rourke and Greg Abbott, and the Pennsylvania election between Hemant Oz and Fetterman. Thank you, Gavi. Back to you.
See students staying active on this.
Those students at NMQ aren't the only ones watching these results closely. I want to bring in Northwestern College Republicans Executive Board Member Austin Bayer. Austin, thank you for joining us. Is this night going how the Republican Party was hoping?
Well, I mean, at this point, we can't see all the results, and ultimately the tally will matter a lot. But I think that overall, Republicans are fairly confident about this election, these midterms, mainly because the last 2 years have been pretty difficult for a lot of the American people. And while not all the blame can be fairly given to President Biden and his administration, it's fair to say that a lot of people feel that Democrats have mismanaged. And overall, a lot of what the exit polls say is that people in general, sort of an 80% difference, trust Republicans more in dealing with issues like the economy and inflation, which are really hurting a lot of people right now.
So as Republicans, but also as a college student, what is the race you're watching most tonight?
I mean, personally, I'm interested in the Fetterman race just because of how he is changing the composition or the presentation of our elected leaders, in my opinion, for the worse. I hope he doesn't win, but we're still paying attention to things like Georgia, where Stacey Abrams has been making some big news.
So when you're talking about that race between Fetterman and Oz, what is it that you object to with the way Fetterman presents himself? How do you feel like that's not what you should see from a politician?
I mean, Fetterman, far from all of his policies and beliefs, which I think are pretty bad and have been proven to be disastrous for the country as a whole, I also think that as a person and the way in which he presents himself, that is not really professional. And we have expectations for how adults behave in business, and we should have similar expectations for politics as well. These are the people, our elected leaders, who will be representing us to each other, our different states in Congress, and also for the rest of the world. And if we have a clown, showing up in his hoodie and shorts, that's fine for me to do so in college. It's not appropriate for a senator of the United States.
So what issues are you focusing most on at the polls, other than the candidates themselves?
I definitely think that most people in this country are concerned about the state of the economy. Inflation has gotten out of control, and that has hurt everybody across the board, but especially those who are from lower income backgrounds. The increase in inflation, especially in costs of food and fuel, can really hurt people and leading into winter and just in ordinary life. And I think that's something that affects working class Americans all across the country, but including college students. We are on fixed tight budgets. Maybe not everybody. Maybe some of us have, our parents' credit card, but that's not true for everybody. And this concern that the economy is going poorly and people are struggling to make ends meet is something that people are resonating with, and the Republican Party has clearly been presenting itself as one that can address these issues head on and not try to change the definition of inflation to make themselves look better.
All right, so looking at so far how races are coming in tonight, I know there's still a lot we're still waiting to hear on the results for. What do you so far think this means for the presidential run in 2024?
I think that things are not looking great for President Biden. And it's not just the general situation of the economy, which always hurts whoever is the incumbent, but also in optics. having had both some candidates really hitch their bandwagons to him and others trying to distance themselves, it will really show if they do well, whether that's sort of a referendum on Biden's popularity. And right now, the exit polls are presenting more Americans disapproving of him than approving.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you making time on what I know is a busy night for all of us. Let's send it over to Jenny.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Thanks, Gabrielle. I'm now joined by political analyst Ben Kaufman. Ben is a Northwestern junior and a member of the Democratic Party. Ben, thanks so much for being here on a busy night. I appreciate it. Yeah, of course. I want to start by asking, how has the night been going for Democrats, especially in those 4 key Senate states, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada?
Well, there haven't been any big surprises so far. As I think we expected, the 4 close Senate races are at the moment too close to call. Polls are still going to be coming in. In Arizona, due to the long lines in Maricopa County, we might not get results for another several days, which really doesn't help all of the voter fraud allegations that are going on there. At the moment, what we only have is a couple bellwethers like Florida, where Ron DeSantis won his race by a huge majority. Marco Rubio also did very well in his Senate race. So as it stands, Democrats don't have anything good to look at for tonight, but we've still got a long way to go.
I want to touch specifically on Nevada and Georgia, both which President Biden won back in 2020. But experts say they're actually some of the Republicans' best shots in flipping a Senate seat this time around. So are you feeling optimistic at all, specifically in those 2 states?
Well, it's hard to say. Both those races are definitely toss-ups. Herschel Walker has given Raphael Warnock a hugely tight race. He's very well funded by Republicans who saw Georgia as the best way to recapture the Senate in 2022. But I think Walker obviously has many issues through his campaign, with many scandals, through his issues with abortion and his issues with trust and lying throughout the campaign. So at the moment, Warnock's leading, but again, we will see how it turns out. It's going to be a very close race throughout the night.
And I want to ask about your thoughts on Democrats campaigning this time around. Abortion, obviously a very big issue Democrats rallied around, but when it comes to the economy, Republicans kind of have a leg up there. So what are your thoughts on how much the Democrats have rallied around abortion?
Well, the Democrats definitely wanted to make abortion the centerpiece of their campaign, and ideally, this entire summer would have been talking about the Dobbs case, because abortion does poll very well with Democratic voters and with independents. But unfortunately, due to the inflation crisis and the gas prices that are going up incessantly, the Republicans are succeeding there because Biden's administration hasn't been able to control inflation, and gas prices have correlated with an uptick in Republican voting and Republican polling. Well, so it's really not looking good for the Democrats, who wanted to avoid making their campaigns about inflation and about gas prices, and instead abortion might be left in the dust.
Alrighty, well, Ben Kaufman, thanks so much again for joining us here tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
There's still much more to come on the Northwestern News Network's Election Night Special. After the break, why Evanston officials were pushing for the city to adopt ranked choice voting, a referendum that it does seem projected to pass.
Worried about your friend, but don't know how to reach out?
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR, it's all good. If you think you should check in, yeah, you should. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Yo, camping buddy. Okay, you guys ready?
Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving.
I definitely can't drive.
Okay.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app.
One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too
Sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
Welcome back. Here in Illinois, among many issues, voters are thinking about crime and police reform as they head to the polls, especially in local races. NNN's Toby Cobby is here with more.
For Illinois voters, this election cycle will serve as a way to express their thoughts on a new bill signed into law in January called the Safety Act. Throughout election season, it's been used as a campaign platform by Democrats and criticized by Republicans. And it's one of the most progressive police reform bills the country has ever seen. The act includes policy changes like banning the purchase and use of some military-grade equipment, including grenade launchers and armored vehicles, requiring use of body cameras statewide by all police officers by 2025, prohibiting chokeholds employed by police, and the elimination of all cash bail. Detainees will no longer need to pay to be released before their trial. Based on a defendant's crime and if they're considered a flight risk or threat by a judge, the judge will determine whether or not they'll need to be detained. This clause is drawing criticism from Republicans and some state attorneys in Illinois, with multiple state attorneys filing lawsuits against the act, including Tom Hain and John Lackey. And the lawsuit, and I quote, says, the lawsuit says that the lawsuit says that taking away cash bail removes a tool that is crucial for the court to continue its processes. Now, Democrats, on the other hand, they think that removing cash bail will make the criminal justice system more equitable and will also reduce pretrial detention, lowering the number of people detained before a guilty verdict. Now, voters were heavily considering crime and police reform in their voting decisions. As polling shows, 64% of Illinois residents worry about their safety daily, according to SafeWise. Now, the Safety Act isn't on the ballot tonight, but it is on Illinois voters' minds. Jenny?
And we're going to take it back to Julia, who is with Jan Schakowsky. Julia, what's the update there?
Hi, so right now I am with the representative from Illinois' 9th District. This is Jan Schakowsky. Thank you so much for joining us. So what does this election mean to you tonight?
Well, you know, I do think in many ways this has been the most important election that I perhaps have seen in my long lifetime. We don't know the total outcomes yet. I think it still looks real possible that the Senate will be in Democratic hands, and we don't know yet who's going to be in the majority. But what I do know is that we had tremendous grassroots support, not only in Illinois and in the Chicago area, but around the country. I think people are awakened to what is really on the ballot. And I think see that the United States Supreme Court and many of the Republicans, the people who espouse Donald Trump's agenda, are really out of touch with what Americans want in this country. So I feel ultimately optimistic that we're going to make real changes, but you know, we'll see. Obviously, I would like to serve in the majority in the House of Representatives, and that's not entirely clear right now. I'm very gratified. Right now, it's not totally finished. I have about 75% of the vote, which is a pretty good number. But I know that I'll be able to go back, and I'm going to continue to fight for, to end gun violence, to protect women's reproductive health, to expand access to health care, to address the climate. Those issues certainly aren't going to go away regardless of the outcome of these elections. So we have work to do.
And obviously you guys have a House majority right now, but if the House flips Republican, what does that mean?
You know, I've been an organizer and say a fighter for most of my adult life. And I'm going to continue. Of course, I'll try as the chairman of, a subcommittee. I'm going to, continue to try and protect consumers the Consumers Protection Subcommittee to work with the Republicans to get some things done. But ultimately, I think what's going to be revealed is that the Americans' primary agenda items will do better under Democrats, and I'm going to fight for that.
Thank you so much, Representative Jan Schakowsky. Thank you so much for joining us.
To you, Congresswoman Schakowsky, and thank you to
Back
you,
to you in the
Judy.
studio.
Thank you both so much for your time. Now, closer to home, a new system might be coming to Evanston for elections. Supporters say it will promote democracy in the city and could be a jumping-off point statewide. NNN's Jeremy Fredericks reports.
Evanston might make history tonight if it votes for ranked choice voting. Also known as RCV, it's a system that will increase popular support for winners.
Evanston prides itself on being a city that is forward-thinking.
RCV allows voters to rank multiple candidates. To win, candidates need 50% or more of the vote. If no one candidate meets that mark, the second choice votes on any ballot that pick the candidate with the smallest percentage are counted. This process continues until there's a majority.
It can lead to a broader base of support kind of behind the eventual winner.
Advocates say RCV will lead to winners with more support and increased election turnout because voters will be more motivated.
In mayoral elections in Minneapolis-St. Paul, you had a 10% increase in turnout.
Supporters say that ranked choice voting will make it easier to vote.
Polls show overwhelmingly voters understand ranked choice voting, they like ranked choice voting, they want to use it again.
City and state officials have endorsed the plan.
But it gives us a sense of how much support really is there for the third party. I think it's an interesting concept, and I think that it's worth passing it here.
If voters accept the results tonight, ranked choice voting will be implemented beginning in 2025. Jeremy Fredericks, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Jeremy, for that report on a referendum that is projected to pass. Another big issue in this election is healthcare. NNN's Ananya Chugh explains the implications for Medicaid and abortion based off tonight's election.
42% of voters listed abortion as extremely important in the upcoming election, according to a recent Gallup poll. But abortion is also connected to broader issues like Medicaid. Medicaid expansion is a major issue, and a pathway to stable coverage could also expand access to abortion care. Currently, federal Medicaid funding can't be used for abortion except in cases of rape, incest, or a life-threatening pregnancy. I spoke with Feinberg School of Medicine Professor Joel Shalowitz, who explained to me what states' reactions might be like should that change.
Medicaid is voluntary to the states, so they do not have to participate. That the states drop out of Medicaid. I mean, they're probably not.
Right now, even though most abortions aren't covered under federal funding, some states have state-level funding go to abortion. These 16 states in dark blue use their own Medicaid funds to provide coverage. But for a state like South Dakota, abortions aren't covered even in cases of rape or incest despite federal policy.
The midterm federal elections may have nothing to do with what happens with abortion. It may be more what's going to happen in the state legislatures.
Since it's up to individual state, Illinois is one where state funds for abortion cover beyond what's required at the federal level. This means Illinois is considered a safe haven for abortion access.
I don't think there's going to be any difference in Illinois. I mean, it's going to be business as usual, except obviously more abortion services in Illinois where people are coming from out of state.
Now that voters are prioritizing abortion at the polls, we'll see how abortion and Medicaid play out in public policy over the next few years. Thanks so much, Ananya. Another issue defining these races is education. The teacher shortage, student debt relief, and school curricula are just some points voters are talking about. NNN's Michaela Denault sat down with former President Barack Obama's Secretary of Education and current CEO of the Education Trust, John King Jr.
How is education policy impacting the midterms?
Education issues are very much front of mind, in particular races. We've got school board races all over the country where folks are debating attacks on teaching the truth about our history. Folks are debating attacks on LGBTQ students. Folks are debating attacks on the civil rights, particularly of trans students. So those are very active issues in local races. We also are seeing in governors' races some attempt to elevate those issues, particularly by some of the more extreme right-wing candidates.
Yeah, and going off of that, how could education be impacted post-election? What is at stake here?
Depending on the future in Congress, you could see further congressional action to codify some of the things that the Biden administration is doing through executive authority. You could also see a congressional conversation about how we fix higher ed funding long term so that we aren't so reliant on student debt. But there are other folks who are running for Congress who are opposed to the debt cancellation plan and don't think the federal government should play a larger role in financing higher education.
What do you hope to see politicians take action on post-election?
So that question of whether or not we're going to do what's necessary to really recover is on the ballot. The question of whether we're going to tackle our deeper inequities. We see less investment in low-income students and students of color, in early childhood, in K-12, in higher ed. That's on the ballot. That's something that members of Congress, state legislators, governors are making decisions about every day.
And so how have you seen student debt loan forgiveness impact voters?
For some folks, it was debt that was preventing them from actually even finishing college because they left school with debt and no degree and couldn't find a way back. So it's been transformative. The polling suggests that most Americans support the debt cancellation, but it's also been a bit of a lightning rod political issue. We've seen a number of states sue to try to block debt cancellation. And we see some campaigns, not many, but some campaigns attacking the president's proposal.
And going off into some other of the current Congress's education legislation, how else do you think that has impacted voters?
In the intervening time period, you've seen this big investment in recovery. School districts investing in additional supports, schools being back in person. And so that's actually led, I think, education to kind of fall a little bit lower on people's priority list because there was this investment in recovery.
And thinking about the two parties, and so what do you think the Democratic policy priorities concerning education is?
When mostly what you're hearing from Democrats around the country, a call to invest more resources in K through 12 education, investments in teachers and improving teacher salaries.
And have you seen Republicans use similar tactics to what Glenn Youngkin used concerning the Parents Matter slogan in 2021?
I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, about 25 miles from where my great-grandfather was enslaved in Gaithersburg, Maryland. The property where my great-grandfather was enslaved still owned to this day by the family that are direct line descendants of the family that enslaved my family. But we have to teach that history. That's the truth of our history. It's ugly, but it's true. And what you see in Glenn Youngkin attack on so-called critical race theory, which is really a body of legal scholarship, not something that's being taught in any first grade classroom, but that attack is used to sort of scare people away from teaching the truth of the history of slavery or segregation or Japanese American internment. Hard parts of our history, but they're real.
According to a National Parents Union October 2022 Parents' Voice survey, 59% of parents are more motivated in this midterm election than the previous. Why do you think that these students and parents are going out and turning up to the polls?
Issues around education for parents are always top of mind, and parents have been through a really difficult period. Again, the COVID disruptions to school were felt in every household in America, and that's made people focus more on those issues.
Do you have anything else you would like to add?
I hope people will turn that frustration into showing up to vote for the things they care about, not let that frustration cause them to retreat from the democratic process.
As you just heard, education is a big issue on the national level. In the state Senate race in Illinois' 9th District, which includes Evanston, 2 local parents are fighting for the job. Democratic incumbent Laura Fine and Republican Paul Kelly's kids both attend schools in the same area. But the candidates have very different perspectives on an issue that's made its way to the national stage: parental oversight in education. Florida's Parental Rights in Education bill, known to critics as the Don't Say Gay bill, is making headlines again following the national proposal of the Stop the Sexualization of Children Act. This would ban conversations about gender identity for children under 10. Now, candidate Kelly has critiqued Illinois' quality of public education. Illinois is a top 10 state for having a high tax burden, according to CNBC, and a significant portion of those taxes go to education. But according to Kelly's website, there is, quote, less transparency in the school curriculum, and taxpaying parents should have more say in their children's education. Kelly was not available for comment. Incumbent Fine says that all history, even the more challenging parts, deserve to be taught openly with guidance from subject matter experts.
Everybody contributes to the history in this country, and that's why it's so important that all these stories are taught and learned, and that every child feels included as a part and not purposely excluded because of who they are or what they believe in.
With parental oversight on the ballot this year, Illinois may see some national conversations about education hitting closer to home. Now let's get one final check about what's happening at Representative Schakowsky's my apologies. We'll be back after the break.
At Northwestern, we're wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Welcome back. There's just a few minutes left in the show.
Let's take a look at some of the results from around the nation, starting locally. In our 9th district, Jan Schakowsky has 75% of the votes, with her GOP challenger Max Rice with 25% of the votes. In New York, the gubernatorial race, Hochul has 66%, Zeldin with 34% of the votes. In the Wisconsin gubernatorial race, Tony Evers has 53% of the votes, with Michaels at 46% of the votes. And in the Texas gubernatorial race, Greg Abbott is winning with 54% of the votes, Beto O'Rourke with 45% of the votes.
In Pennsylvania, Shapiro currently has 59% of the vote, while his Republican challenger Mastriano is at 39%. Over in Georgia, in the governor's race, currently Kemp sits at 54%, while Stacey Abrams is sitting at 46%. And at 9 o'clock, Arizona and Nevada, which just passed now, will be closing their polls.
Let's head over to Max Rothfelder at the big board. Max, what are we still waiting for?
Yeah, Jenny, so I'm going to do just a brief rundown of what's happened tonight. So when we talk about the House, you need 218, I got the number right up there, seats in order to win. Right now, we haven't had a lot of races called, just 47 for Democrats, 82 for Republicans. But the big key here is this number 5 is down to 3. Republicans have already flipped 2 seats. That means they only need 3 3 more. And as races keep getting called, it's starting to trend in the direction of Republicans. Now at the Senate, we've been talking about this number all night. 1, that's the number of seats that need to be gained. And this is how it can happen. So we're keeping a close eye on these races. Nevada and Arizona, as they just mentioned, just closed. We don't have data in for those. Georgia, it's starting to come in the data. We'll talk about it in a second. Pennsylvania as well, we're starting to get numbers. New Hampshire, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin, all getting closer and closer to their results. We really haven't had any surprises either. Right now it's 39-40. There haven't been any surprising results in terms of the races that have already been called. Typically red states have gone red. Typically blue states have gone blue. So let's talk a little bit more about the Senate. Of course, here in Wisconsin, that's where we're going to start. It's currently a red state. Johnson is trailing a little bit. Again, it's early, only 30% of the vote in, as you can see there. We're going to continue watching that. Here in Pennsylvania, you can see here, Fetterman has a bit of a lead. Again, only 23% in. We're going to have to keep waiting for that. Remember, could be election of hours and even days, and for the case of Georgia, months, if there is, in fact, a runoff. In Ohio, it's, of course, currently a Republican held state. J.D. Vance does have the lead a bit over there over Ryan, 49% in. It's starting to trend well for the Republicans there. In North Carolina, this one was looking a little back and forth early, but Bud's doing a little bit stronger now, 50%. That's with 2/3 of the vote in, hasn't been called yet. And then Georgia, that's the one that we're going to be watching probably through December. You can see here 49%, 49%. It's been going back and forth. Walker's come ahead, Warnock's gone ahead. They've been going neck and neck, but again, neither of them have hit the big number. 50%. That's what you need in order to prevent a runoff from happening. You've got to get the full majority. So the other thing we've been watching this entire election, we've talked about it all night, is trust in elections. So what do Americans say? Well, 19% of Republicans have said that if their party loses, fraud is a highly likely cause. That's the same for 11% of Democrats. Those are fairly high numbers, but nothing crazy. And if we look into the election data tonight, we have not had any reports of anything fraudulent from any state, any federal governments, no reports of fraudulent claim, which is good for the faith in American elections. So that's going to keep happening throughout the night. You can, keep watching the races. We'll be able to see them called in the days and possibly weeks to come. That's all I've got for y'all tonight. Back to you at the desk.
Thanks, Max, for your work all night. We couldn't have done it without you.
And to close out our night, let's bring in NNN's Vanessa Kelson and Jonas Blum. Thank you both for being here.
So looking at tonight's races, a lot has been called and a lot has not been called. One of the key races that has been called looking towards 2024 is the Florida governor's race. Ron DeSantis is the clear projected winner. Back in 2018, he won by a small margin, whereas that was not the case this time. Now, one key thing with DeSantis is that he hasn't decided yet whether or not to declare if he will be doing a presidential run in 2024. During the one governor's debate that there was between him and Crist, he refused to answer when pressed on that question, which is a key thing to watch in the next couple years while we're looking forward to 2024 and the next election day. Now, Florida is one of those states that has been called. Jenny, what do you have in some of the states that haven't been?
Well, let's take a look at Georgia, for example. Both the gubernatorial and Senate races are very tight, and in fact, like Max said, it could very well go into that December 6th runoff. I want to ask you both. I mean, some experts have saying that it may be Stacey Abrams' best bet to somehow ensure Brian Kemp doesn't get 50% or more of those voters, so that again it can go into that runoff. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's very likely right now that that will go to a runoff, and generally we see with runoff elections that there's a lot more voter turnout, and in history it shows us that high voter turnout leads to Democratic victories. Although all the polling does lead towards a Republican victory here, it's very possible that if we did see this December runoff, we could see another blue Georgian.
And I want to touch on Pennsylvania before we close out for the night. That momentum shift with mail-in ballots. Democrats typically prefer those mail-in ballots, so a lot of experts are saying that we could see the votes lean towards the Republican side, but as the night progresses and those mail-in ballots are counted, the momentum might shift. What do you have to say on that?
So yes, on mail-in, the momentum could shift towards the Democrat across the night. Although looking at the map right now, we have lots of results in from the Philadelphia suburbs, Montgomery County, Bucks County, lots of results in from the Pittsburgh suburbs, Allegheny County, and very few results from the center of the state. Center County, which is where Penn State is, and also Clinton County. Both counties generally go red, and there's very few results in from these more rural Pennsylvania counties. So while mail-in votes getting counted will swing the state a little more blue, these rural counties getting counted as well will bring it back to the center. So we'll see how it turns out.
Vanessa, did you have any final thoughts on anything from tonight?
Absolutely. I'd love to take note of just a lot of these unprecedented elections that we do know about so far. Some pretty notable ones. First of all, Maryland elected their first ever black governor. Massachusetts elected its first ever woman governor and the nation's first ever openly lesbian governor. Arkansas elected their first woman governor as well, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And Maxwell Frost, who is just 25 years old, became the first Gen Z member of Congress tonight, a Democrat from Florida. So definitely a turning of tides, and it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the elections play out tonight.
Well, Vanessa Kelson and Jonas Blum, thank you both for joining us. Well, that will do it for tonight on this Election Night Special.
Thank you for joining us here at Northwestern News Network. The 2022 midterms have certainly been a blast to cover, and the implications of tonight's results are going to be storylines we will be following here at NNN.
Tune in next week for Politicat's special recap coverage. But in the meantime, we want to thank Medill's Associate Director of Multimedia Broadcast Operations, Matt Schrock, for his help in getting tonight's show on the air.
For Diego and Melina and all of us here at the Northwestern News Network, I'm Gabrielle Coriati.
And I'm Jenny He. Have a wonderful night.